Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. It was a cold evening when Alice and her friends arrived at the lodge, tucked away deep in the woods. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving only a faint glow in the sky. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder that the forest was alive, breathing, waiting. The lodge was old, its timbers worn and groaning under the weight of time. Windows cracked with age, the glass now yellowed and warped. Its stone chimney puffed smoke into the chill air, the flickering orange glow from the fire inside visible through the cracks in the door. Alice, a lover of the quiet and unknown, had found this place online. A secluded retreat, away from the bustling world. But as the van pulled up the long, winding path, something unsettled her. The silence seemed too deep. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, only the hum of the engine as it stilled. "It's perfect," said Sarah, her voice cutting through the quiet. She had always been the adventurous one, drawn to the mystery of places like this. "Yeah, it's definitely unique," Alice muttered, looking at the looming shadows of the forest. There was something about the place that felt off. The front door creaked as they entered, the wood nearly screaming in protest. Inside, the lodge was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls, the flickering light of a fire dancing in the hearth. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of burning wood and something else. Something musty, like old books left to gather dust in a forgotten corner. "We'll get used to it," Sarah said with a grin, clearly not sensing the unease that gripped Alice. She set her bag down on the large, worn couch and immediately collapsed onto it. Alice, however, remained by the door. Something was pulling at her, tugging her to the farthest corner of the lodge where the shadows were darker and the air colder. She glanced at the others. Mark and Sarah were unpacking, chatting about the hike they'd do tomorrow, but Alice felt her feet move on their own, her gaze drawn to the corridor leading further into the lodge. "Why not?" she thought. "It's probably just the stories I've been reading. Nothing to worry about." But as she stepped deeper into the house, a chill ran down her spine, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Alice's footsteps echoed down the long corridor, her heart beating in rhythm with each step. The walls were lined with old portraits, faces that seemed to watch her as she passed. Some were faded with time, the eyes in the pictures dull and lifeless, while others appeared strangely vibrant, their subjects gazing out from their frames with unsettling clarity. She paused in front of one portrait, a large oil painting of a man. His features were sharp, his eyes too intense, and his lips curled into an almost knowing smile. The name beneath the painting read Lorenzo Grayson, but Alice didn't recognize the name. There was something about his gaze, something that felt familiar, as though she had seen him before, but she couldn't place it. A sudden draft passed through the hallway, causing the firelight to flicker, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. Alice shivered, her breath visible in the air, though the fire was still burning brightly in the hearth at the other end of the lodge. She turned and walked further down the corridor, her footsteps slow, hesitant. The wood beneath her feet creaked and groaned, almost as if the house itself were alive, stretching and shifting in response to her presence. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and dust, the weight of years pressing down on her. As she reached the end of the hall, she noticed the door. It was slightly ajar, the wooden frame old and chipped, the paint peeling away in places. Something about it felt wrong. It was as if the room behind it had been sealed off for a reason, as though it held secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. Alice's curiosity got the better of her. She reached out and pushed the door open with a creak, stepping into the room beyond. The room was small, filled with a sense of heaviness that seemed to seep from the very walls. Old furniture lay scattered around the space, some pieces covered in heavy, dust-laden sheets, while others sat in disarray, as if someone had left in a hurry. A single window, blocked by the growth of the forest outside, let in very little light, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and something far more sinister. It was then that she saw it, a large wooden chest sitting in the far corner of the room. The chest looked ancient, its surface scratched and scarred, as though it had endured countless years of neglect. Alice's eyes were drawn to it, and before she knew what she was doing, her hands were already reaching toward the dusty lid. Just as her fingers brushed against the cold wood, she heard a voice, a soft whisper, coming from behind her. "Alice?" The whisper was barely audible, but it was unmistakable. Her heart skipped a beat, and she spun around, expecting to see one of her friends standing there, playing a prank. But there was no one. The room was empty, the door she had just opened now closed tightly behind her. She stood frozen, her breath shallow. It wasn't the first time she had heard something strange in this place, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. She could feel it, an energy dark and ancient, that lingered in the air, heavy and oppressive. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from somewhere above, followed by the sound of something, or someone, scraping across the floor above her. Alice's blood ran cold, and for a moment she thought she had imagined it. But then it came again, louder this time, closer. Something was moving above her. She backed away from the chest, her hands trembling, but just as she turned to leave the room, a soft sound caught her ear, a faint click. Her eyes darted back to the chest, and to her horror, she saw the lid slowly begin to lift on its own. The whispering voice returned, clearer now, almost a chant, "Come, come." It was as though the chest was calling to her. Alice's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. She could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as she watched the chest slowly creak open. From the shadows inside, something moved. The air grew colder, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. Alice could see the faintest glimmer of something metallic, a glint of silver or perhaps glass, shining through the darkness within. Before she could stop herself, her feet carried her closer to the chest, the voice now a constant, swirling chant in her mind. She couldn't think. She couldn't move. All she could do was reach forward, her fingers brushing against the cold, damp surface of the chest as the lid fully opened with a deafening creak. Inside the chest was a book, old and worn, its leather cover cracked and faded with age. There were no markings on its cover, no title, nothing to indicate what it was or why it was there. But Alice knew deep down that this book was not just a book. It was something far more dangerous. As she reached for it, a sudden crash from the hallway startled her, and she jerked her hand back. The moment her fingers left the book, the room seemed to come alive. The walls groaned, the floor beneath her feet vibrated, and the whispering grew louder, more insistent. She turned toward the door, ready to run, but the moment she moved, the door slammed shut with a thunderous bang, trapping her inside. Alice's heart pounded in her chest as the door slammed shut behind her. She stood frozen, her breath shallow and quick, staring at the wooden panels that now seemed to mock her with their impenetrability. The air felt thicker, as though the walls were closing in, pressing against her from all sides. The whispering voice, unseen but ever present, lingered in her mind, urging her forward. For a moment, all she could do was stand there, lost in the overwhelming sense of dread that gripped her. The lodge had always felt old, ancient even, but now it felt alive, as though it had awakened, its hidden corners stirring with energy. She could almost feel it, the watchful eyes of something ancient and dark, something that had been lying in wait. The book in the chest seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. It called to her, its presence undeniable. Without thinking, her hands moved on their own, reaching out for the object. It was as if the book itself was pulling her in, its cover cold to the touch, its leather rough and cracked under her fingers. The moment her hand made contact with it, she felt a jolt of electricity surge through her, a wave of cold that numbed her fingers and left her feeling disoriented. She jerked her hand back, but the book remained in place as if frozen in time. The room around her seemed to grow colder still, and the whispering voice intensified, now echoing all around her, as though it were coming from the walls themselves. "Open it," the voice said, barely more than a breath, but its command was unmistakable. Alice hesitated. She didn't know why, but she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She wanted to run, to escape this place, but she also felt drawn to the book, to the knowledge it might hold. It was a pull she couldn't explain, as if some invisible force was bending her will, steering her toward the unknown. She glanced over her shoulder at the locked door. The hallway outside seemed impossibly far away, like a different world entirely. The crashing sounds from above had stopped, but the oppressive silence that followed felt even more unsettling. It was as though the lodge was waiting, holding its breath. And then the voice spoke again. "Only the chosen one can know." Alice shuddered, the words like a cold wind on the back of her neck. Her hand hovered above the book, trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to turn and run, but her curiosity overpowered her fear. She had to know. What was it about this place? What was she missing? Slowly, carefully, she opened the cover. The air in the room seemed to shift as the pages cracked open, their yellowed edges delicate against her fingertips. The book was written in a language she didn't recognize, symbols twisted and strange, flowing across the pages like a river of ink that didn't belong to any known alphabet. And yet, as her eyes scanned the pages, something began to happen. The symbols blurred and twisted, shifting in front of her eyes, and though she couldn't understand them, she could feel the meaning seeping into her mind. It was as though the book was unlocking something inside her, something long forgotten. Her hands were shaking now, and she could feel the temperature in the room plummeting even further. The fire in the hearth seemed to flicker and die, as if the flames themselves were being suffocated by the darkness. A deep, resonating hum filled the room, vibrating in the air, pressing against her ears, making her head ache. And then, in the very back of the book, she found it. A single page, blank except for a symbol, a dark, twisted spiral. It was unlike anything she had seen before, and yet it felt familiar, as though it had been burned into her memory long ago. As her eyes lingered on the symbol, she felt a cold rush of air against her skin, a sensation of something brushing past her, unseen. "Welcome," the voice whispered once more, so close now that it felt as though it were speaking directly into her ear. "Welcome to the hollowing deep." Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaking in protest as if the house itself were waking from a long slumber. The door rattled and Alice spun toward it, her breath coming in quick gasps. The shadow of someone, moved behind the door. Her pulse quickened. The door shook harder now, and with a loud crash, it flung open, sending her stumbling backward into the room. Standing in the doorway was a figure. Tall and cloaked, its features hidden beneath the hood of its dark robe. The figure didn't move, but Alice could feel its presence, its oppressive weight filling the space. A chill ran through her, a cold that was not of this world, a presence that seemed to exist beyond the fabric of reality itself. "Alice." The figure spoke her name, its voice a low, guttural growl that made her insides tremble. "You've opened the door. Now you must come with me." Alice stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. The book in her hands felt suddenly heavier, the pages trembling as if alive, as though they too were afraid of what was to come. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, but deep down, she knew that whatever lay ahead was something she couldn't avoid. The choice had been made the moment she had opened the book. "Alice," the voice whispered again, this time softer, almost soothing. "It's time to face the truth." And then the world around her seemed to dissolve. The walls of the room warped and bent, the light from the fire flickering as if it were being consumed by the darkness. The shadowy figure stepped forward, its presence overwhelming, and Alice felt herself being pulled toward it, as if her very soul was being drawn into its depths. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the twisted spiral symbol from the book, glowing faintly in the air, spinning with an eerie light, and then, nothing. When Alice opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the room with the book. The walls, the fire, the oppressive darkness, everything had disappeared. In its place was something far worse. She found herself standing in a vast, empty forest, the trees towering high above her, their bark twisted and gnarled like ancient fingers reaching toward the sky. The air was thick with mist, swirling around her ankles and creeping up to her waist. The ground beneath her feet was soft, uneven, and damp, as though the forest had been hidden from the world for centuries. Every step she took sank into the earth slightly, the heavy fog making it difficult to see more than a few feet in any direction. A chill ran through her as she shivered in the damp air. The trees were silent, unnervingly silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, no animal calls. Just a deep, unnatural stillness that hung over everything like a thick, suffocating blanket. The only sound was the faint whispering of the wind, but even that felt wrong, as if it carried with it 1,000 voices speaking in tongues, languages Alice could not understand. She tried to move, to take control of her body, but her limbs felt sluggish, as if the fog itself were pulling her down. Her heart began to race as the oppressive silence seemed to deepen around her. The fog began to thicken, curling and twisting like tendrils, wrapping itself around her like a living thing. "Alice?" A voice called again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the hooded figure, nor was it the soft whisper from the book. It was a voice that carried an eerie familiarity, as if she had heard it before, a long time ago. She turned toward the sound, her movements slow and labored, her breath shallow as she scanned the trees around her. But there was no one in sight. The mist swirled unnervingly close, as though it were alive and seeking her out. She could feel something watching her, waiting. The voice called again, but this time it was not just a whisper, it was a command. "Come closer." Alice couldn't tell if the voice was inside her mind or coming from the very trees around her, but she had no choice but to obey. Her feet moved, though she had no control over them, and as she stepped deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to part before her, creating a narrow path leading further into the mist. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the air became. The trees closed in on her, their twisted branches reaching down like claws, as though they were trying to trap her. The fog thickened, swirling around her, obscuring her vision. The further she went, the more the world around her seemed to fade, as if it were slipping away into some other realm entirely. And then she saw it. A massive tree unlike any she had ever seen before. Its trunk was enormous, gnarled and twisted, with roots that seemed to stretch deep into the earth like veins, pulsing with a strange, dark energy. Its bark was black as night, cracked and charred, as though it had been burned by some ancient fire that had never truly gone out. The tree seemed to emanate a deep, malevolent energy, a presence so strong that Alice could feel it pressing against her chest, suffocating her. At the base of the tree, there was a hollow, wide and dark, like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. The ground around it was littered with remnants of strange symbols, etched into the earth in a language she couldn't understand. The symbols seemed to glow faintly, their edges shimmering with an ethereal light. "Alice," the voice whispered again, but this time it wasn't just a command. It was a plea. "Come closer. It is your destiny." Her body moved of its own accord, and before she could stop herself, she was standing at the edge of the tree's hollow, staring into the darkness within. She felt a pull, deep, primal, irresistible. The darkness inside the hollow seemed to reach out to her, as if calling her to enter, to become part of whatever lay beyond. With each passing second, the pull grew stronger. The air grew colder, and Alice's breath came out in shaky gasps, visible in the freezing air. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest, and she could feel her thoughts unraveling, her mind clouded by a growing sense of inevitability. Her feet moved again, slowly, but she was powerless to stop them. She reached the edge of the hollow, her face inches from the dark void. The whispers were louder now, filling her head with a maddening chorus of voices, their words blending into an unintelligible cacophony. It was as if the world around her was being consumed by the darkness. Suddenly, something stirred inside the hollow. A shadow, a movement barely perceptible, shifted in the darkness. It was a figure, but not like any figure Alice had ever seen. Its form was fluid, like smoke or mist, twisting and writhing, yet it seemed to have substance, as though it were part of the very darkness itself. The figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows, its form becoming clearer with each movement. The figure was tall, its body draped in robes of black, the fabric swirling and shifting like the night sky. The hood was pulled low, obscuring its face, but Alice could feel its gaze, cold and predatory, locked onto her. There was no warmth in its eyes, only a void, a hollow darkness that seemed to reach into her very soul. "You've come," the figure said, its voice low and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. It wasn't a voice that belonged to any human. It was the voice of something ancient, something that had existed long before the forest, long before the lodge, long before Alice had ever set foot in this cursed place. "Welcome to the hollowing deep." The figure raised one hand, its fingers elongated and skeletal, pointing toward the hollow. Alice felt the pull intensify, as if the very fabric of her reality was bending, warping, and drawing her into this dark abyss. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her body trembled, and her mind screamed for escape, but it was too late. She was already being drawn in, her feet taking the first step into the darkness. And then the forest fell silent. The last thing Alice saw before the darkness swallowed her was the twisted face of the figure, its eyes glimmering with an eerie, unearthly light. The moment Alice's foot crossed the threshold of the hollow, the world around her fractured. The forest, the trees, the chilling wind, all of it disappeared, vanishing into the suffocating blackness that enveloped her. The dark figure loomed at the edge of her consciousness, its presence fading into the swirling void behind her. She tried to turn back, but something held her in place, a force far stronger than her will, pulling her deeper into the unknown. It was not just the absence of light that consumed her. It was the absence of everything. There was no up, no down, no ground beneath her feet, only an infinite expanse of shadow, a void that stretched endlessly in every direction. Her sense of self seemed to dissolve, her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. The air was thick, as if it had a physical weight, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Every inhale felt like she was sucking in the void itself. The pull toward the depths of the hollow was undeniable, like a magnetic force that guided her step by step. She had no control over her movements, her legs carrying her forward through the suffocating blackness. It was as if the very essence of the place was reshaping her, bending her to its will. The further she went, the more the darkness seemed to close in on her, the space around her growing tighter and tighter, until she was sure she would be crushed by its weight. Her mind spun in confusion as memories, visions, and half-formed thoughts flickered like broken shards of glass. There were flashes of the lodge, the warmth of the fire, the faint laughter of her friends, but they felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else, not her. She could no longer remember how she had come to this place, how she had found herself standing at the edge of the hollow, the book, everything blurred together, dissolving like smoke. And then, just when she thought she could bear it no longer, she heard the voice again. Alice. It was soft but resonant, echoing in her mind like a dark lullaby. This time the voice didn't sound distant. It was inside her, threading through her thoughts like a whisper in the very core of her being. She could feel it vibrating through her bones, each word like a shock to her senses. You are meant for this. You are the one. You must embrace the hollow. Alice felt something shift in the depths of her chest, a pressure that made her ribs feel as though they might crack. It was the feeling of something being unlocked, something old and dangerous buried deep within her soul. She had no choice but to listen to it. The feeling, the voice, the presence, it was all part of her now and part of this place. Before she could make sense of it all, the darkness around her suddenly shifted. She was falling. The ground, if it could even be called that, beneath her feet seemed to open up, a rift that split the void wide. The sensation of falling was not like any physical sensation she had ever known. It wasn't just gravity pulling her downward. It was the world itself swallowing her whole. The air rushed past her, colder than any winter wind, biting into her skin as she plummeted into an abyss that stretched forever. As she fell, her surroundings began to change. The blackness softened, replaced by a faint, dim light that glowed with an unnatural hue. A deep purple, flickering like the last remnants of an old flame. The walls of the abyss began to twist and shift, morphing into organic shapes, like veins, roots, and sinew. The ground below began to take on a semblance of form, rising in strange, jagged formations, as if she were falling through a vast, living organism. The deeper she descended, the more the air seemed to hum, vibrating with a strange, unsettling energy. The walls around her pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air itself seemed to breathe. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the fall stopped. Alice landed with a jarring thud, her body crashing against the cold, uneven ground. Her limbs ached from the impact, but she didn't move. She lay still for a moment, trying to gather her bearings, her mind reeling from the fall. The mist around her now had a tangible weight to it, clinging to her skin like damp cloth. The world was silent, utterly silent, but for a faint, echoing hum that seemed to be coming from the very ground itself. Slowly, Alice pushed herself up, her body trembling. Her hands found the ground, and she braced herself against the jagged rock formations that surrounded her. The landscape was alien, twisted trees with branches that curled like talons, plants that looked both familiar and foreign, their leaves shimmering in the faint purple light. The air was thick with a heavy, metallic scent, like blood, mixed with the acrid tang of something decayed. She stumbled forward, the ground shifting beneath her feet, and that's when she saw them. Figures, shadows, loomed in the distance. They were humanoid, but their forms were distorted, twisted in unnatural shapes, like broken reflections of something human. Their limbs were too long, their bodies too thin, their faces obscured by hoods or masks. They stood still, like statues, as if they were watching her, waiting for something. Alice froze, her breath caught in her throat. She had the overwhelming feeling that these creatures, these things, were not supposed to be seen. That her very presence here was a mistake, a breach in some ancient law that had kept this place hidden for centuries. One of the figures moved. Its long, thin arms stretched out toward her, its fingers curled like claws. It took a slow, deliberate step forward, and Alice could feel a wave of nausea roll through her. She wanted to run, to scream, but she couldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, her body refusing to obey. And then the figure spoke, its voice a low, guttural rasp that seemed to rattle the very air. "The hollowing has begun," it said, its voice cold and hollow. "You are here, and there is no going back." The air grew colder still, and the shadows around Alice seemed to close in, the ground beneath her feet trembling with some ancient power. She was no longer in control. The hollowing had claimed her, and there was no escape. The coldness of the place seeped into Alice's bones, more profound than any chill she had ever felt. It wasn't just the absence of warmth, it was as though the very air was frozen in time, as though the world had forgotten how to breathe. Her limbs ached with the effort to stay upright, her heart pounding in her chest as the twisted figures moved closer, their forms shifting in the purple-tinted mist. The air around her hummed, and Alice could hear it now, a low, unearthly melody, like the sound of 1,000 voices whispering in unison, singing a song she couldn't understand. It was a chant, slow and rhythmic, and it reverberated through her chest, as though it were resonating in the very core of her being. The figure that had moved toward her, its long, spindly limbs and hooded face, was now standing just in front of her. Its presence was overwhelming, a dark aura that pressed in on her, suffocating her. It leaned closer, its skeletal hand reaching out toward her, the fingers elongated, almost claw-like. Alice wanted to step back, to escape, but her feet felt like they were anchored to the ground, her legs too heavy to move. She felt as if she were caught in some invisible web, the threads tightening around her with each passing moment. The figure spoke again, its voice like the sound of cracking ice, low and cruel. "You are chosen, Alice," it rasped, each word dripping with an ancient malevolence. "The Hallowing has called you. You belong to it now." The words struck Alice like a blow, but she couldn't make sense of them. The Hallowing? What did it mean? She had no memory of making any choice, no memory of asking for this, no idea what this Hallowing was. The figure continued, its voice somehow growing louder despite the silence of the world around them. "The Hallowing is not just a place, it is a being. A force older than the forest, older than the world itself. It is a hunger, a void that seeks to devour everything, to claim all that lives. And you, Alice, are its vessel." A shiver ran down her spine, but her thoughts remained clouded, as though a thick fog were seeping into her mind, blocking out all logic and reason. The figure reached out, and with one delicate finger, it traced a line across her skin. The touch was icy, sending a wave of cold so deep it felt as though it was peeling away layers of her very soul. The figure's lips curled into a semblance of a smile, though there was nothing warm or kind in it. "You are the one who will awaken the Hallowing. You will release it from its prison," it said softly, almost reverently. "You will set it free." At those words, Alice's heart skipped a beat. The Hallowing, had it been imprisoned? Was it this ancient force that had brought her here? How could anyone release something like that? The figure's hands suddenly twitched, and Alice felt a sharp pang of dread as a force like a wave of darkness pulsed through the air, swirling around her like a storm. Her mind screamed, warning her, but the power of the Hallowing was too strong. She was too close to it now. She felt as though she were slipping away, losing herself to the very darkness that filled the air. She tried to fight it, tried to push back against the oncoming tide, but it was futile. Then, without warning, the mist around her parted. Something began to move in the distance, a shadow against the endless void, emerging from the depths of the forest. It was unlike the figures she had seen before. This figure was tall, its body outlined in a strange, shimmering light that seemed to pulse with each movement, as if it were made of the same darkness Alice had come to fear. The figure's face was hidden beneath a cloak, but Alice could feel its presence, familiar yet alien. Its energy was different from the others. It was powerful, ancient, and it filled the space with an overwhelming sense of inevitability. The first figure bowed its head at the arrival of the new being, its voice a whisper. "The Hallowing will be reborn." The figure that had emerged from the depths of the mist stepped forward, its movements fluid and effortless, as though it were gliding rather than walking. There was no sound when it moved, no footfalls on the damp ground, no rustling of air. It was as if the figure existed outside the realm of sound altogether. Alice could feel the weight of its gaze upon her, though she couldn't see its face. She tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but her words caught in her throat, like smoke that dissipated before they could form. She could feel her own powerlessness, like an anchor pulling her deeper into this strange, twisted place. And then, to her shock, the figure spoke, not to her, but to the first being that had spoken to her. "She is not ready," the new figure said, its voice cold and resonant, a commanding presence that sent a shiver down Alice's spine. "She does not yet understand the Hallowing's true nature. You are rushing it. You must wait." The first figure recoiled, its form trembling as though it had been struck. It lowered its head, and in that moment, Alice saw something that startled her. The creature was afraid. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it was enough to send a wave of confusion through her. These things, these creatures that seemed so powerful, were not invincible. They too could fear. The figure that had arrived from the mist turned its gaze toward Alice, and for the first time since she had entered this dark, oppressive world, she felt something stir within her. It was an odd sensation, a strange recognition, as though this being had once been a part of her life. Its presence was a knot of tension, but not one of fear. There was something more familiar about it than anything else in this forsaken place. "Your mind is clouded by the Hallowing's influence," the figure said, its voice low and soothing, though still filled with an unsettling power. It is calling to you, twisting your thoughts, but you can fight it. You must. Alice's heart skipped a beat. Was there a way out? Was there a chance for her to break free of the Hollowing's grip? The figure extended a hand toward her, and in that moment, Alice realized it was not offering her power. It was offering her a choice, a chance to reject what was happening, to fight against the pull of the Hollowing. But would she have the strength? Would she have the courage to make that choice? For the first time, Alice saw a glimmer of hope, but it was distant, fragile. The Hollowing's call still echoed in her mind, louder than ever, drowning out everything else. It was a struggle, one that would take everything she had. The air around Alice seemed to hum with an unseen force, thick and heavy with the weight of 1,000 unspoken promises. The figure's outstretched hand hung in the dim light, suspended in the eerie quiet of the Hollowing's realm. Her heart raced, her mind a jumbled mess of confusion and fear, but now there was a flicker of something else. Something like clarity. The oppressive darkness that had gripped her since her arrival was slowly starting to lift, but only just enough for her to recognize the perilous choice she faced. The figure's voice had resonated within her, like a subtle vibration, echoing in the deepest recesses of her thoughts. You must fight it. But how? She had no understanding of this place, no memory of who she was before she stepped into the lodge. The Hollowing had consumed so much of her, her thoughts muddled by its influence. She could feel its tendrils weaving into her mind, like roots digging into the soil, anchoring her to this realm. But the figure before her, though veiled in shadow, felt different. Its presence wasn't a cold void like the others. It wasn't wrapped in the same malevolent energy. It was somehow familiar. Alice felt it deep within her. Something in her soul whispered that this being had once known her, that it had always known her, even before the Hollowing had taken hold. She took a trembling step toward the figure's outstretched hand, her feet heavy in the fog, the ground beneath her pulse with a faint rhythmic hum that seemed to synchronize with her own heartbeat. The figure's hand remained still, waiting. The others, the twisted, ghastly shapes standing in the distance, watching her with those hollow, all-knowing eyes, remained silent, as though they understood that this moment was one of great importance. You must decide, Alice. The figure's voice was steady, but laced with an underlying urgency. The Hollowing calls to you, yes, but there is another path, a way to break free. But it will require everything you have, everything you are. Her pulse quickened. Everything she was? What did that mean? Her head swirled with the words, but her legs still carried her forward, one step at a time. She could feel the Hollowing's grip tightening around her chest, and the cold tendrils of its influence seeped deeper into her mind. Yet she fought the compulsion to give in. The knowledge that there was someone, reaching out to her, pulling her back from the brink, filled her with a fleeting sense of purpose. You have forgotten, haven't you? The figure's voice was softer now, more like a whisper, as if it were speaking to her from a long-forgotten memory. The Hollowing seeks to consume you, yes, but you were never meant to be its vessel. You were meant to stand against it. The words were like a splash of cold water. Her vision blurred as memories that had been locked away began to surface. Faint images of a time before the Hollowing, before this forsaken place. She saw a woman, a younger version of herself, standing tall and resolute, her hands glowing with a soft, golden light. She saw a place, a vibrant forest, full of life and warmth, where the trees sang in the wind and the air was thick with magic. But there was also darkness in the memory, creeping at the edges. A dark, terrible force that had sought to corrupt everything. She saw the figure again, but this time it was not as a shadow. It was alive, radiating light, standing before her in a way that was both foreign and familiar. The image flickered, and she saw herself standing beside it, facing the Hollowing, holding it at bay with nothing but her will. You were the guardian, the figure spoke again, its voice like a caress, the one chosen to protect the balance. But the Hollowing sought to break you, to make you forget. Now you must reclaim your strength. You must remember. The fog began to clear just a little. The memories rushed back, crashing into her like waves. Her name, Alice Grayson, rose to the surface, but it wasn't just her name. She saw her family, a legacy of guardians stretching back centuries, protectors of the realm that bridged the world of the living with the Hollowing's domain. They had fought, generation after generation, against the darkness that sought to consume them, and Alice had been their chosen heir. But something had gone wrong. Somewhere along the line she had lost herself, lost her way. You were once strong, Alice, but now you must choose. The weight of the figure's words pressed against her chest, like the crushing weight of the entire forest. The Hollowing was still there, swirling in the corners of her mind, trying to consume everything she was. It whispered to her, promised her power, eternal life, and dominion over the forces that controlled this twisted realm. She had felt the Hollowing's power, and in that power, there was a dangerous allure. The promise of control, of strength beyond anything she had ever known. The lure of it was like a poison, seeping into her thoughts, enticing her to surrender, to give herself to the darkness, to let it consume her and shape her into something more. But could she? Could she really turn away from it? Her gaze fell to the figure before her, its eyes, if they could be called eyes, shining with a steady, unwavering light. In those eyes she saw no judgment, no anger, only a deep and unshakable certainty. You are the only one who can stop it, Alice. You are the key. Not to destroy the Hollowing, but to contain it. To stop it from consuming the world. The words stung, like a sharp blade cutting through the haze in her mind. She wasn't just any ordinary person. She was a guardian, the last of her kind. It was her responsibility, her destiny, to stop the Hollowing, to stop it from spreading. But was she strong enough to take on that burden? Could she fight the darkness within her, and hold it at bay long enough to break free? The voice of the Hollowing rose again, louder this time, like a chorus of thousands, all calling to her in perfect harmony. The pull was overwhelming, dizzying, but she gripped the figure's hand tighter, using it as an anchor to hold herself steady. I don't know if I can, she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of the decision. I don't know if I can fight it. You can, the figure said, its voice full of conviction. You have already fought it, and you will again. For a moment, time seemed to stretch out, each second lasting an eternity. Alice's mind raced. The Hollowing's call was all around her, urging her to give in, but the figure's hand, its presence, grounded her. She could feel the light that flickered inside of her, faint but growing stronger with each passing second. The choice was hers to make. She took a deep breath. Her fingers, trembling, closed around the figure's hand. She could feel the warmth of it, an energy that was both foreign and familiar. A spark of hope, a reminder of who she truly was. I choose to fight, she whispered. And with that, the world shifted. The moment Alice made her choice, the world around her seemed to shift, the very fabric of reality bending like a fragile thread pulled taut. The air grew thick with energy, and she could feel it coursing through her veins, powerful, ancient, and raw. It was as though every cell in her body had been awakened at once, every dormant spark of magic that had been locked away for so long now surging to life. The Hollowing, that dark, consuming force, still lingered, but now it felt distant, smaller, weaker. The figure before her, still veiled in shadow, remained steady, its presence unyielding as Alice's transformation took place. The strange sensation of power growing within her was overwhelming at first, a wave of light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her heartbeat. But rather than swallowing her, it empowered her, rekindling something deep inside, something primal. You've made the right choice, the figure spoke softly, its voice now more than just a whisper. It was like a melody, ancient and comforting, reaching into the very depths of her soul. The Hollowing is not an enemy that can be destroyed, Alice. It is a part of this world, a force that must be contained, kept in balance. You are the keeper of that balance. Alice's breath caught in her throat as the words sank in. She wasn't just a victim of the Hollowing. She had never been. She was its counterforce. She had always been the one to stop it, to keep it from consuming everything. The power she now felt was her own. It was as if a door had opened within her, an ancient, forgotten door, revealing a well of strength that had always been there, buried beneath years of fear, confusion, and the Hollowing's influence. But it wasn't just the power that she had reclaimed, it was her mind. The fog that had clouded her thoughts for so long began to dissipate, piece by piece, until it was gone entirely. The weight of the Hollowing's presence still loomed, but now, Alice felt something else within her, purpose. She could feel it in her chest, the same warmth that had once surrounded her in the old forest of her memories, the ancient place where the guardians had once stood together. Alice, the figure said again, its voice gentle but firm. You must remember, the Hollowing feeds on fear. It feeds on doubt, but it can only grow if you allow it. You are the keeper of the key. You can lock it away. The power coursing through her body felt like an extension of herself now, not something alien or foreign, but a part of her soul that had been hidden for so long. Her hands trembled as she extended them, the air around her crackling with an energy she could barely comprehend. The ground beneath her feet hummed with power as the figure's presence remained steadfast at her side, guiding her through the fog that still lingered in her mind. She could feel it then, the Hollowing. It was closer now. The very essence of it was entwined with her thoughts, like a shadow that clung to her skin. It was alive, aware of her defiance. Alice could almost hear its voice, low and hissing, whispering in her ear, promising power, promising eternal life, promising everything she had ever desired. But as its whispers grew louder, something inside Alice also grew stronger. The light inside her, her own will, pushed back against the darkness, forcing it to retreat. The whispers grew distant, the pull of the hollowing weakening. The more she focused on her power, on her right to control the balance, the more the darkness unraveled. "You cannot fight me, Alice," the voice of the hollowing echoed in her mind. "You will succumb. You will give in." But Alice stood tall, the strength that was now her birthright pulsing through her every word. "No," she said firmly, her voice unyielding. "I choose not to." The power inside her flared in response, erupting outward in a wave that sent ripples of light through the surrounding mist. The trees around her, twisted and gnarled, darkened by the hollowing's touch, began to shift, their shapes straightening, their bark brightening as if bathed in moonlight. The ground underfoot hummed with new life as the balance began to shift. "Impossible," the hollowing's voice whispered, now tinged with fear. "You are nothing but a vessel, a toy to be controlled. You cannot stop me." But Alice felt no fear. The hollowing may have been powerful, ancient, but it was no match for the light inside her. She had always been its equal, just as her ancestors had been. She was a guardian, born to protect the balance, and she had finally remembered who she truly was. As her power continued to surge, a crackling sound filled the air. The hollowing's dark influence began to unravel, its grip weakening with each passing second. It was as if the very essence of the hollowing was being forced back into the earth, into its prison. The shadows that had once surrounded Alice now shrank back, retreating into the corners of the mist. But the struggle was not over. The figure before her did not move, but its presence was now an anchor, steady and strong. "You must finish it," the figure intoned, its voice a low murmur of guidance. "Contain it, bind it." The hollowing's energy was still present, still trying to break free, its essence a chaotic force that howled in the distance. But Alice now understood. She was not here to destroy it. She was here to hold it, to contain it, to lock it away where it could no longer threaten the world. With a deep breath, Alice extended her hands again, this time focusing all her energy on the swirling vortex of power that still circled around her. The ground trembled as she focused, pulling the light within her, channeling it into the air. Slowly, the hollowing began to take shape again, its form more like a shifting mass of shadows writhing in agony. With every ounce of willpower she had, Alice spoke the words she had learned long ago, words whispered to her by her ancestors. The words of containment, words that would bind the hollowing to the earth where it could do no more harm. "By the light of the guardian's blood, by the roots of the earth, by the eternal will of those who protect this realm, I bind thee," Alice whispered. The air around her crackled with energy, and the hollowing's form began to twist violently. But Alice stood firm, her feet rooted to the ground. The words she spoke rang out in the air, growing stronger as the power built around her, surrounding her in a cocoon of light. The hollowing shrieked, its voice now a chorus of thousands, but Alice pressed on, her hands steady, her mind clear. "By my will, by my strength, I bind thee to this realm, never more to break free." With a final surge of energy, the hollowing's form collapsed in on itself, drawn back into the earth. The land shook as the power of the binding took root, and for the first time since Alice had arrived, the forest grew still. The darkness receded. The air, heavy and cold, began to warm, the oppressive weight lifting from her chest. The mist began to dissipate, and the trees around her stood tall once more, their gnarled forms now straightened, bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of a reborn world. Alice stood alone in the quiet, her hands still outstretched, the power within her slowly ebbing. But she didn't feel weak. She felt whole. The battle had been won. For now. But Alice knew, deep in her bones, that the hollowing would never be truly gone. It would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting, and she would be ready. Always ready. The quiet after the storm was deafening. Alice stood alone, surrounded by the remnants of the battle she had just fought. The world around her had changed, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all merely a temporary reprieve. The hollowing had been contained, yes, but she could still feel it, lurking at the edges of her consciousness, waiting for a weakness, a crack in her resolve. She inhaled deeply, the air now fresh and rich with the scent of earth and life. The mist that had once choked the forest had cleared, replaced by a soft golden light that filtered through the canopy. The trees around her were no longer twisted and gnarled. Their bark was now smooth, with vibrant green leaves that swayed gently in the breeze. It was as if the entire forest had been reborn, renewed by the power that Alice had called forth. But despite the beauty, Alice could still feel the lingering weight of her actions. She had chosen to contain the hollowing, to lock it away, but at what cost? The magic she had invoked, powerful and ancient, had left her feeling drained. Her body ached, and her mind was still fogged with the remnants of the battle. She was no longer the same Alice that had stepped into this cursed forest. The very fabric of her being had shifted. As she stood there, trying to regain her composure, a soft rustling behind her drew her attention. She turned, her senses still heightened from the battle. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was the figure who had guided her through the hollowing's influence. "You did it," the figure said, its voice filled with a deep, unspoken understanding. "You chose to stand against the darkness, and you succeeded." Alice's breath hitched as she gazed at the figure, still shrouded in mystery. It had been her anchor, the one presence that had helped her remember who she was, who she had always been. But now, as she looked at it, she felt a new wave of confusion. "What now?" Alice asked, her voice weary but resolute. "What happens to me now? To the world?" The figure tilted its head, its gaze steady and unyielding. "Now you must walk the path of the Guardians. You are no longer just Alice Grayson. You are the last of your kind, the Guardian. And it is your responsibility to ensure that the hollowing does not return, to maintain the balance." Alice's chest tightened. The weight of those words pressed against her like a stone. She had always known that the Guardians were protectors, keepers of the balance between worlds, but the reality of it was overwhelming. She had been chosen for this role, yes, but she had never truly understood the scope of it. Now, standing here, surrounded by the reborn forest, she realized the depth of the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. "The hollowing will never truly be gone," the figure continued. "It is a part of this world, a force that cannot be destroyed, only contained. And you must be vigilant, Alice. You must ensure that it does not break free again." Alice closed her eyes, the weight of those words sinking deep into her heart. She had already felt the pull of the hollowing once, and she knew that it would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. But she also knew that she had power now, power she had never fully understood until this moment. She was a guardian, the last of her kind, and it was her duty to protect the balance. The figure stepped forward, its movements graceful and silent. "You are not alone in this, Alice," it said, its voice softening. "There are others who will guide you, the spirits of the Guardians before you. They are always watching, always waiting to offer their wisdom. But remember, you must also trust yourself. Trust the power that now flows through you." Alice nodded, her heart heavy with the realization of what lay ahead. She was no longer just a woman who had stumbled into a cursed forest. She was something more. She was a keeper of an ancient, eternal balance. A protector of worlds, both seen and unseen. But with that power came a price, one that she would have to pay every day of her life. She turned away from the figure, gazing out over the reborn forest. The trees stood tall and strong, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze, the light filtering through the branches. But even as she looked at the beauty of the forest, she could still sense the hollowing's presence beneath the surface. It had been pushed back, but it was not gone. It would never be gone. "You are strong, Alice," the figure said from behind her. "But you must also remember that the balance is fragile, and even the smallest of cracks can allow darkness to slip through." Alice's hand clenched into a fist at her side. She understood now. The hollowing was not just a force that existed outside of her, it was a part of her, too. Her own fear, her doubt, her anger, all of it could give rise to the darkness. She was the keeper of the balance, and it was up to her to ensure that the hollowing did not reclaim the world. "I won't fail," Alice whispered, her voice steady despite the weight of her resolve. "I won't let it take over again." The figure nodded. "Good. But remember, Alice, the path ahead is not an easy one. There will be trials, there will be enemies, and there will be moments of doubt. But you must stand firm. The hollowing is always watching, always waiting." Alice took a deep breath, her eyes locked on the horizon. The forest stretched out before her, a vast and untamed wilderness, full of beauty and danger in equal measure. It was a world that she had once thought she understood, but now she realized it was a world that would always be full of mystery, full of darkness and light intertwined. The figure's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and distant. "You are the last of the Guardians, Alice, and you will carry this burden alone. But you are never truly alone. The spirits of those who came before you will guide you. They will watch over you. With that, the figure faded into the mist, its presence lingering only in the echo of its words. Alice stood in silence for a moment longer, feeling the weight of her new reality settle over her. The hollowing had been contained, but the fight was far from over. It would always be there, lurking in the shadows, testing her strength, her resolve. But she would not falter. She would stand tall, just as the guardians had done before her. The forest had been reborn, and so had she. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but Alice was ready, and she would not allow the hollowing to break free again. Not as long as she stood to protect the balance. Alice stood motionless, the weight of her newfound purpose settling over her like a cloak woven from both light and darkness. The mist had dissipated entirely now, leaving behind a crisp, cool air that seemed to hum with the energy of the reborn forest. Yet beneath that there was something more, a pulse, an undercurrent, an awareness that lingered in the air. The hollowing was still there, beneath the surface of everything, an ever-present reminder of the balance she was sworn to protect. She knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The hollowing, though contained, had left its mark not just on the world but on her. She could feel it in her bones, in her very essence, the faint whisper of its power still lingering, like a shadow in her heart. The darkness was never far, and Alice understood now that she would be forced to confront it again and again. She had heard the figure's words, "The spirits of the guardians will guide you." But Alice had little understanding of what that truly meant. The guardians before her had lived and died, their legacies carved into the fabric of the world like ancient markings on stone. But the world she lived in now was very different. The power of the hollowing had spread farther than any of the previous guardians had ever known. It wasn't just a force that existed in the shadows anymore, it was something that could seep into the hearts of people, twist their minds, and turn the very air around them into a weapon. The time had come to seek the wisdom of those who had walked this path before her. But where were they now? How could she reach them when they had long since passed into the realm of shadows themselves? As if in answer to her question, the ground beneath her feet trembled. Not a violent shaking, but a subtle, resonating thrum, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Alice's gaze snapped downward, her senses sharpening. The power inside her flickered, a response to the pulse of the earth. There was something here, something beneath her, something ancient. The spirits? Could this be their calling? Or was it the hollowing trying to reach her once more? Without thinking, her feet moved of their own accord, guiding her toward the center of the forest where the earth seemed to hum louder. Each step felt heavier than the last, but it wasn't a burden. It was as though the forest itself was inviting her, pulling her forward, guiding her to whatever secret lay buried in its depths. The trees stood silent, their towering forms silent witnesses to her journey. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint, sweet fragrance of flowers Alice had never seen before. Their petals glowed faintly in the dim light, shimmering like stars in the growing twilight. The ground beneath her began to slope downward, and soon, Alice found herself standing at the entrance to a cavern. The opening was hidden beneath a thick tangle of vines, their leaves a deep green, curling like fingers, protective in their nature. Without hesitation, Alice pushed the vines aside, her hand brushing against the cool, smooth stone of the cavern's entrance. The cavern was dark, utterly dark, yet Alice could see. The power she had invoked was still with her, a soft, golden glow that emanated from her hands, illuminating the stone walls that stretched upwards into a vast, unknown expanse. The air in the cavern felt different, thick with history, dense with the weight of forgotten secrets. The further she descended, the more the air shifted. It was cooler here, the kind of coolness that settled deep into the bones, and there was an eerie stillness, as though the very walls of the cavern were holding their breath. But Alice felt no fear. Instead, she felt connected. The cavern was alive with something ancient, something that had waited for her. At the bottom of the cavern, she finally found it. A stone circle, etched with symbols that seemed to shift and change as she gazed at them. The markings were familiar, though she had never seen them before. They were the symbols of the guardians, the ancient runes that were said to hold the knowledge and power of the first keepers. These markings were not just decorative. They were alive, pulsing with energy, resonating with the heartbeat of the earth. Alice stepped forward, her heart racing. As her feet crossed the threshold of the circle, a surge of power rushed through her, the earth beneath her feet humming with life. She gasped, her hands trembling as she reached out toward the stone pillar in the center of the circle. It was carved from a dark, obsidian-like stone, smooth and black, but it seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her fingers brushed the surface, and in that instant, a flood of images rushed into her mind, visions of long-forgotten guardians, standing at the edges of the hollowing's domain, holding back the darkness with nothing but their will. She saw herself among them, her hands glowing with the same light as theirs, fighting alongside them to protect the realm. The spirits of those who had come before her stood tall, their faces both familiar and strange, like echoes of lives lived long ago. "You have come, Alice," a voice echoed in her mind, soft but clear. It was both a whisper and a command, a voice filled with ancient wisdom. "You are the last, the one who will carry the legacy of the Guardians. You must continue what they have started. You are not just a keeper. You are the key." Alice's breath caught in her throat. The voice came again, resonating within her very being. "You must unlock the heart of the forest, Alice. The power of the Guardians lies within you and within this place. You must awaken it, for the battle is far from over." The heart of the forest? Alice had never heard of such a thing. But the moment the words echoed in her mind, she knew it was real. She could feel it deep within her, a sensation as old as time itself, a calling that resonated with the very core of her being. The heart of the forest was a place, a power, hidden deep within the earth, waiting for the right guardian to awaken it. "What is it?" Alice whispered aloud, her voice reverberating in the cavern. "What is the heart of the forest? How do I unlock it?" The voice responded, its tone rich with the weight of ages. "It is the source of all life, all power. It is the pulse of this world, the heart that keeps the balance intact. The hollowing seeks to corrupt it, to turn it into a weapon. But if you unlock its power, you will have the strength to banish the hollowing for good. You will have the power to shape the world as you see fit." Alice's heart raced, her thoughts a whirlpool of questions and uncertainty. This was more than she had ever anticipated. The hollowing was far more dangerous than she had imagined, and its reach extended far beyond what she had understood. But the heart of the forest, could it truly hold the key to ending the darkness once and for all? And yet, even as she thought these things, a seed of doubt bloomed within her. The voice had said she would have the power to shape the world as she saw fit. Power. Control. Was she ready for that kind of responsibility? What would it mean to wield such force? Could she resist the temptation to use it for herself? To undo the very balance she had sworn to protect? But then the cold truth struck her. She didn't have a choice. The hollowing would never stop. It would always seek to break free, to corrupt the world. Alice was its keeper, and only by unlocking the heart of the forest could she hope to control it. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, reaching out toward the stone. The power she had inside her surged, flowing outward, connecting her to the cavern, to the world around her. And as her fingers pressed against the obsidian stone, the symbols around the circle began to glow with a bright, golden light. The heart of the forest was awakening. The moment Alice's fingers touched the obsidian stone, the ground beneath her seemed to vibrate, the pulse of the earth synchronizing with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The cavern hummed with life, the ancient runes glowing brighter, their intricate patterns shifting and twisting as if coming alive under her touch. The stone was cool, but Alice felt a surge of warmth flow through her, like an electric current, crackling with power. It was as though the very essence of the earth was speaking to her, calling her forth, urging her to unlock the secrets of the heart. For a brief moment, Alice's thoughts spun in a whirl of confusion, doubt, and fear. The power she was tapping into was vast, unimaginable. The heart of the forest was not just a relic of the Guardians. It was something more, something primal, something that connected all life. The hollowing had sought to corrupt it, to twist its purpose and use it as a weapon. And Alice, now more than ever, understood that this power was the key to stopping the darkness once and for all. But as the golden light from the runes intensified, Alice could feel the weight of responsibility pressing against her. This wasn't just a test of strength, it was a test of her will. Could she control the power of the heart without succumbing to its allure? Could she resist the temptation to wield it for herself? Her breath quickened, her palms growing slick against the stone as the pulse of energy continued to build, swirling around her in a torrent of golden light. The symbols in the circle began to pulse in time with her heartbeat, and she could feel the power inside her awakening once more, as though it were waiting for this very moment. She had always known that the Guardians were keepers of balance, but what if the power of the heart was more than just a tool for containing the hollowing? What if it was also a test? A test of her own soul, her ability to withstand the corrupting pull of absolute power. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the cavern, and Alice gasped as the words reverberated within her chest. Only the pure of heart may unlock the heart of the forest. Only those who can balance both light and shadow, who understand the weight of their choices, can claim its power. The voice was neither male nor female, but filled with a kind of ancient wisdom that transcended gender, age, or time. It was the voice of the earth, the voice of the guardians who had come before her. It was a warning and a challenge. Alice's mind reeled with the implications of the voice's words. Only the pure of heart. What did that mean for her? Could she truly be pure after everything she had endured? After all the fear, the confusion, and the darkness she had carried with her for so long? Her hand remained pressed against the stone, but she felt herself drifting inward, as though the cavern's energy were pulling her into a deeper state of consciousness. The pulse of the heart of the forest was no longer just a physical sensation. It was mental, spiritual. It was as if the stone had become a conduit, allowing her to peer into the depths of her own soul. Suddenly, memories flooded her mind, memories of the past, of her life before she had stepped into this cursed forest. The feeling of the wind in her hair, the warmth of the sun on her face, the laughter of friends long forgotten. Her family, her ancestors, all of them guardians before her. She saw herself as a child, innocent and full of hope, before the weight of the hollowing had begun to cast its shadow over her life. And then the hollowing appeared in her thoughts, a dark, twisting mass as it had been in the forest, the voice of the dark force echoing in her mind, promising power, offering her dominion over all things. "Join me, Alice," the hollowing whispered, its voice silky and seductive. "Embrace the darkness within you. You are strong enough to wield it, strong enough to reshape this world." The temptation was sharp, like a knife pressing against her heart. The hollowing was not just an enemy, it was a reflection of herself. Her anger, her doubt, her fear. All of those things could be channeled, twisted into strength. Power unlike anything she had ever known. It promised her control. It promised her an end to the uncertainty, to the endless struggle. But as the hollowing's voice echoed louder, Alice felt the light within her stir, faint but growing. The warmth of the forest, the connection she had to this place, to the guardians before her, filled her soul. She understood now what the voice had meant. She couldn't wield the heart's power unless she could balance the light and shadow within herself. She couldn't become the guardian she was meant to be unless she learned to accept both sides of her nature, the darkness and the light. With a slow, steady breath, Alice closed her eyes, grounding herself in the moment. She felt the pull of the hollowing, but she didn't fight it. She acknowledged it. The darkness had always been a part of her, but it was not who she was. The hollowing might tempt her, might whisper lies of power and control, but she knew now that power, true power, came from balance. The voice of the guardians echoed again, louder this time. "You are not alone, Alice. You never were. The heart of the forest will guide you, but only if you are willing to walk its path." The pulse of energy from the stone intensified, and Alice felt the ground beneath her tremble in response. She had made her choice. The heart was hers to unlock, not because she wanted to control it, but because she understood its true purpose. It was a force for balance, not destruction. The hollowing had twisted that purpose, corrupted it, but she would restore it. She would stand firm in the face of the darkness, and she would protect the balance no matter the cost. She took a deep breath, focusing all of her energy on the stone, on the power swirling around her, the power within her. The light inside her surged, a golden flame that grew brighter with each passing second. She didn't fight the darkness within her. Instead, she embraced it, acknowledging its presence but choosing to move beyond it. The stone in front of her cracked, a sharp, resonant sound that echoed through the cavern, and Alice's heart skipped a beat. The symbols around the circle flared to life, their golden light so bright it almost blinded her. The air in the cavern thickened, humming with the raw energy that pulsed from the heart of the forest. And then, with a sudden, explosive surge of power, the stone shattered, and the heart was revealed. It was not a physical object, but a glowing, ethereal core, a sphere of golden light, suspended in the air, radiating warmth and power. It pulsed with life, each beat of its light syncing with Alice's heartbeat. The energy it gave off was both comforting and overwhelming, a force of nature that seemed to speak directly to her soul. The hollowing, now fully aware of what was happening, shrieked in her mind. "You cannot hold this power, Alice. It is too much for you to control. You will succumb." But Alice stood tall, the warmth of the heart surrounding her like a shield. She had made her choice. She had embraced both the light and the shadow within her, and now she would control the power of the heart. Not for herself, not for dominion, but for the balance of the world. And with that thought, the heart's light exploded outward in a brilliant burst, sending waves of energy flooding through the cavern and beyond into the world above. The moment the heart of the forest exploded in a burst of light, Alice felt as though the entire world had shifted. The energy radiating from it was so intense, so pure, that it overwhelmed her senses. The cavern itself seemed to groan under the weight of the power, the walls trembling, the air thick with a tangible charge, as if the very atmosphere was alive. The light, golden and pure, engulfed her, and for a split second, Alice feared she might be consumed by it. But then, in an instant, she understood. She wasn't just receiving the heart's power, she was becoming a part of it. She could feel it coursing through her, filling every fiber of her being with warmth, with knowledge, with an ancient, infinite wisdom. It was as if the very spirit of the forest, the essence of all life, was whispering to her, telling her the secrets of the world. The weight of the power was both exhilarating and terrifying. She could feel the Hollowing's presence too, faint, distant, but ever watchful. It had felt the surge of energy as well, and Alice knew that it would not rest until it had found a way to break free once again. But the heart was no longer just a tool. It was alive, and with it, Alice could feel the threads of balance stretching out before her, threads that connected all things. The forest, the creatures, the very land beneath her feet. The voices of the guardians echoed in her mind, urging her onward. You are the keeper now, Alice. The balance is in your hands. The voice of the Hollowing, however, was more insistent, more desperate. You cannot wield such power, Alice. You are not the one who should control it. You will fail. You will fall. But Alice stood firm, her hands clenched around the power now flowing through her. She had faced the darkness before, and she had chosen not to let it define her. This power, the heart's power, was not meant to be hoarded or used for destruction. It was meant to protect, to preserve the balance of the world. But even as she stood there, standing in the cavern's heart, feeling the pulse of the heart within her, Alice knew that she had only just begun. The power was immense, yes, but it was also a burden. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing against her chest, reminding her that this path would not be an easy one. The Hollowing was not the only threat in the world. There were other forces at play, forces that would seek to control the heart, to twist its power for their own gain. And Alice, as the keeper, would have to face them all. But she could not do this alone. As the golden light slowly began to fade, Alice's senses returned to the present. She stood in the cavern, her feet planted firmly on the stone floor, her fingers still outstretched toward the now shattered stone. The heart, its radiant glow now a soft, steady pulse, hovered just above the ground. In the distance, the sound of footsteps broke the stillness, and Alice turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows. At first, she thought it was another spirit of the forest, another guardian sent to guide her. But as the figure stepped into the light, Alice's breath caught in her throat. It was a woman. Her face was pale, her eyes bright and alert, but there was something in her gaze, something familiar. The woman's hair was long, silver and braided, and she wore a dark cloak that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light, as if woven from the very fabric of the night itself. Who are you?" Alice asked, her voice hoarse, still raw from the power that had flooded her. The woman stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "I am one who has waited for you, Alice. I am one who knows the heart as well as you now do. I am Lysandra." Lysandra? The name echoed in Alice's mind, as if it were a faint memory tugging at the edges of her consciousness. She searched her thoughts, but nothing seemed to align. She had never heard of Lysandra before, yet there was something about her that felt familiar. "Lysandra," Alice repeated, her voice soft. "But I don't understand. Were you really? What do you want from me?" Lysandra's expression softened, and she stepped forward, reaching out a hand as though to offer reassurance. "I am not here to harm you, Alice. I am here to help you understand the true nature of the power you have just unlocked. You have awakened the heart, but it is not the end of your journey. It is only the beginning." Alice furrowed her brow, trying to understand. The beginning of what? Lysandra's eyes glimmered with an ancient sadness. The heart is more than just power. It is the essence of all life, and it must be protected at all costs. But it is also vulnerable, especially now that its power has been awakened. There are others who will come for it, who will stop at nothing to control it. The words hit Alice like a punch to the gut. "Who?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who would dare to challenge me? I am the keeper. The heart is mine to protect." Lysandra's gaze hardened. "You are the keeper, yes, but even the strongest guardians can fall. There are others, dark factions, long-forgotten cults, that seek to use the heart for their own twisted purposes. The Hollowing is just one manifestation of the evil that seeks to control this power." Alice's heart raced. She had fought the Hollowing before, but now she understood that it was only one part of a much larger, far more dangerous picture. The heart had awakened, and with it, a new struggle had begun. One that Alice would have to face not alone, but with those who had walked this path before her. "But why didn't you come sooner?" Alice asked, the frustration and fear bubbling in her chest. "Why wait until now to tell me all this?" Lysandra's expression softened once more. "I have watched you, Alice, from the moment you set foot in this forest. I have seen the power within you, and I have seen your struggle. You are the keeper, yes, but you are still learning. The heart cannot be wielded by just anyone. It must be controlled, and the control must come from within. That is why I am here. To teach you." A cold shiver ran down Alice's spine. "Teach me? Teach me how to control it? How to use it?" Lysandra nodded slowly. "Control the heart, and you control the balance. Fail, and the world will fall into darkness." The gravity of her words settled over Alice like a heavy cloak. She had already made a choice, but now she realized just how much she had yet to learn. The heart of the forest had given her the power she needed to fight, but now it was up to her to master that power, to wield it wisely and carefully, because the world was not safe, and the hollowing was not the only darkness that would rise. The cavern seemed to quiet around Alice, the echoes of Lysandra's words settling into her mind like heavy stones. She had thought that unlocking the heart of the forest would be the end of her journey, a final victory over the hollowing. But now, it seemed as if she had only stepped onto a much darker, more uncertain path. Lysandra's gaze was unwavering, her expression filled with both pity and determination. "You must understand, Alice," she began, her voice carrying the weight of ancient wisdom. "The heart's power is not something you can simply control through will alone. It requires discipline. It requires balance. More than just the balance between light and shadow, but the balance within yourself. The heart will test you just as the hollowing did. Only this time, the stakes will be much higher." Alice took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirl of thoughts spinning in her mind. She had always been a fighter. She had faced the hollowing, felt its cold touch, its insidious whispers in her mind. But now, faced with the true depth of the heart's power, she felt a growing unease. What had she truly unleashed? She had known the responsibility, but she had not fully understood the gravity of it. Lysandra's eyes softened, though her words were stern. "You are not alone in this, Alice. The heart has chosen you, but it is not something to be wielded carelessly. There are others who would seek to claim it for themselves. Dark sorcerers, ancient cults, creatures of the deep forest whose loyalty lies only with the hollowing. They will come for the heart. They will come for you." Alice's pulse quickened at the mention of these dark forces. Her mind flashed back to the eerie whispers she had heard in the cavern as the heart had awakened. The hollowing wasn't finished. It would never be finished. There was something worse lurking in the depths of the world, something darker than the corrupted power she had just fought. Lysandra turned, motioning for Alice to follow. She led her through the cavern, walking toward an arched passage that Alice had not noticed before. The path was narrow, the air damp and cool, and it smelled of earth, moss, and something ancient. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols Alice didn't recognize, etched deep into the stone, worn by time yet still pulsating with a faint, ethereal glow. "What are these symbols?" Alice asked, her voice a whisper in the still air. "They are the remnants of the first guardians," Lysandra replied, glancing at the markings. "They built this place, and these symbols hold the secrets of their knowledge. The heart has been guarded by the first for millennia. They understood its power, its importance. They understood that it could never fall into the wrong hands." They walked deeper into the passage, the glow of the symbols casting eerie shadows along the walls. Alice could feel the power growing stronger as they descended, a quiet, humming energy vibrating beneath her feet, as if the very earth was alive with the force that had been sealed here for so long. Eventually, they reached a large chamber, the ceiling stretching high above them, disappearing into darkness. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone pedestal, covered in vines and ancient roots. The stone was worn, the surface carved with intricate patterns and runes, some familiar, some not. It was as if the pedestal itself was a living, breathing entity, one that had witnessed countless centuries. Lysandra gestured for Alice to step forward. "This is where the heart's power is kept in balance," she explained, her voice reverberating in the stillness. "This chamber, these markings, the heart, everything here is part of the natural order. You were right to unlock the heart's power, but now you must learn how to channel it." Alice stepped cautiously toward the pedestal, the power in the room pressing against her skin like 1,000 unseen eyes watching her every move. Her hand hovered above the stone, feeling the warmth radiating from it. She could hear the faint, echoing pulse of the heart in her mind, a rhythmic thrum that seemed to call her name. How do I learn to control it? Alice asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Lysandra stepped closer, placing her hand over Alice's. You will face trials just as the guardians before you did. The heart will test your resolve, your strength, and your heart. You must prove that you can harness its power, that you can carry the burden of its responsibility. Trials? Alice asked, feeling the weight of the word settle on her shoulders. What kind of trials? Lysandra's expression was grave. The trials of the keeper are not physical, but mental and spiritual. You will be tested in ways that will challenge your very understanding of yourself. Your fears, your weaknesses, your doubts, all of them will be laid bare. The heart will expose them, force you to confront the darkness within you. Only once you pass these trials will you truly be ready to wield its power. Alice's breath hitched. The thought of confronting her inner darkness terrified her. She had spent so much of her life running from it, from the fear that the Hallowing had instilled in her. The idea of facing it head-on, of laying bare her deepest insecurities and doubts, made her want to turn and flee. But then she remembered the Hallowing. She remembered how it had tried to consume her, how it had twisted everything she had believed. And in that moment, Alice realized that if she was to protect the balance, she could not run from her fears any longer. She would have to face them head-on. I'm ready, Alice said, her voice stronger now. I'll do whatever it takes. Lysandra nodded, her gaze filled with both pride and sorrow. The first trial will come soon. But before you begin, you must understand this. The heart does not give its power freely. It demands a price. You must be willing to sacrifice, to give of yourself, to protect the world. Alice swallowed hard, her throat tight. What do you mean, sacrifice? The heart demands loyalty, Lysandra replied, her voice low and steady. It will not tolerate weakness, nor will it accept anything less than your full commitment. When the time comes, you will have to choose between the heart's power and the world it protects. And that choice will not be easy. Alice's heart sank as she took in Lysandra's words. She had thought that unlocking the heart would be the solution, the end of her struggle. But now she saw that the heart was not a simple tool. It was a force, alive with power, yes, but also filled with consequences. Consequences that would test her in ways she could not yet understand. The first trial begins now, Lysandra said, her voice a whisper in the vastness of the chamber. You must face your greatest fear. You must confront the darkness within you, the very thing that the Hallowing seeks to use. If you are to become the true keeper of the heart, you must first defeat it. Before Alice could respond, the chamber around them seemed to shift. The walls closed in, the light from the symbols dimming, and the air grew thick with a heavy fog. A cold wind swept through the room, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of whispers, low, insistent whispers that seemed to come from all around her. Do not listen to them, Alice, Lysandra's voice rang out, but it felt distant, almost as if it were being swallowed by the mist. Alice's eyes darted around the chamber. The whispers grew louder, and with them came flashes, images of her past, of her greatest fears. The faces of those she had loved, their eyes hollow and filled with despair. The feeling of helplessness, of being consumed by the very darkness she had fought so hard to defeat. Her knees trembled, but Alice refused to give in. She had faced the Hallowing. She had stood her ground before. She could do this. With a steadying breath, Alice stepped forward, her mind focused. She would face her fear, her greatest weakness. She would not be consumed again. And with that thought, the trial began. The air around Alice seemed to grow heavier as the chamber shifted, a palpable weight pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. The once soft hum of the heart of the forest had faded, replaced by a rising tension that filled the air, thick and suffocating. The whispers grew louder, rising in volume until they filled the space, reverberating in the deepest corners of her mind. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath, trying to ground herself in the present. The air was cold now, chilling her skin to the bone, and her heartbeat quickened. It was like being in a dream. Her senses were heightened, but her body felt disconnected, as though she were no longer entirely within herself. The first whisper came clear, soft and distant. Alice? Her eyes shot open, but the chamber remained dark, the stone walls now covered in a thick fog, swirling like smoke. The familiar golden glow from the symbols was gone, replaced by a dim, eerie light that seemed to flicker and pulse in time with her heartbeat. Alice? The voice was familiar, but it sent a chill down her spine. It was her own voice, or was it? Who's there? Alice called out, her voice shaking slightly, but she forced herself to stay firm. She had faced the Hallowing before, she could face whatever this was, whatever it was trying to do. But the whispers only grew louder, swirling around her, until the words were no longer clear, but indistinct, pressing in on her from every direction. The sound of her name repeated, pulling at her consciousness like an anchor, trying to drag her back to something she didn't want to face. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block them out. Then the mist in front of her began to shift, swirling more violently, forming shapes, dark, indistinct figures that emerged from the fog like shadows pulled from a nightmare. She took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. The figures didn't seem to have form, only the sense of presence, like specters from the deepest parts of her mind, drawn from her darkest memories. "Alice," one of them whispered again, its voice heavy with familiarity, as if it had spoken her name 1,000 times before. The shape shifted, growing clearer, until the figure before her was unmistakable. It was her mother. Her face was gaunt and hollow, her eyes wide with fear, staring directly at Alice. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Instead, Alice heard the whispers in her mind, the same ones she had heard before. "I'm not enough. I've never been enough. Mom?" Alice breathed, her voice barely a whisper, a tremble in her chest. She reached out, but the figure faded before her touch could reach it, replaced by another. This time a man. Her father. The air around Alice grew colder still, and she stepped backward, the sight of them too much to bear. These were faces she hadn't seen in years. Faces that had haunted her dreams, the ones she had failed to protect. "No," Alice whispered to herself. "You're not real. None of this is real." But still, the voices kept coming, each one growing louder, more insistent. The figures shifted, morphed, until Alice recognized them. People from her past, both friends and foes alike, some long gone, others still lingering in her thoughts. Each one looked at her with hollow, empty eyes, accusing her, blaming her. They weren't just strangers, though. They were her own demons. "Alice," they all whispered, their voices overlapping, "you failed us. You've always failed us." "No," Alice cried out, her voice rising in desperation. She stepped forward, fists clenched, but the images just kept multiplying, blurring into one swirling mass of faces and shadows. She stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the weight of their accusations. Failed. Weak. Alone. Unworthy. The words pounded in her mind, drowning out everything else. They felt so real, these voices. They were the fears she had hidden deep within herself. The fear of never being good enough, the fear of not living up to the expectations of others, the fear of losing everyone she loved. The figures of her parents now stood before her, their forms reaching out as if to take her hands, their voices calling her name in that same haunting whisper. But Alice didn't reach for them. Instead, she stepped back again, this time firmly, feeling her feet digging into the cold stone beneath her. She wasn't going to let them pull her in. She wasn't going to let her fear control her again. "No," she whispered again, her voice breaking through the cacophony of whispers. "I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not weak. I'm not afraid." The images flickered, shifted, but they did not disappear. They kept coming, their whispers crawling into her skin, her mind, like an infection. But Alice stood her ground. "You are not real," she said louder this time. "You are not me. You are my fears, my doubts, but you do not define me." And with that, the first change occurred. The mist around her thinned, the figures of her past fading, their whispers diminishing in volume until they were nothing more than distant murmurs in her mind. She stood alone, the chamber once again silent, save for the echo of her own breath. Alice swallowed hard, feeling the weight of what she had just confronted. The grief, the guilt, the anger that she had buried deep within her, all the things that had made her feel small, insignificant, unworthy. The Halloween had tried to exploit those feelings, to twist them, to turn her own weaknesses against her. But now, for the first time, Alice understood that the darkness inside her was not something to fear, it was something to acknowledge. And in acknowledging it, she could control it. The light in the cavern seemed to return in small increments, first the dim glow, then brighter and brighter as the weight in the air lifted. She felt the heart's power flowing through her once more, but now it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt right, as if the very essence of it was aligned with her own soul. Lysandra appeared beside her, her expression unreadable, but her eyes filled with a quiet pride. "You have faced your first trial, Alice. But remember, this is just the beginning. You will face more. And with each trial, you will become stronger." Alice nodded slowly, her chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of her breath. She wasn't entirely sure what had happened or how she had made it through, but she knew one thing for sure. She had changed. She had faced the darkness within her, and she had not been consumed by it. For the first time since she had stepped into this cursed forest, she truly understood what it meant to be the keeper of the heart. She wasn't just a protector of the balance between light and dark. She was its embodiment. And no matter what came next, she would face it, fully aware of both the light and the darkness inside her. Alice stood in the cavern, the faint glow of the heart still pulsing softly in the center of the stone pedestal, its golden light now steady and constant. Lysandra's presence beside her felt grounding, like a steadying hand on her shoulder. She could still feel the lingering tremors of the trial she had just faced, the echoes of the whispers in her mind. The images had faded, but the impact of what she had just experienced was still alive within her. She had confronted her greatest fear, the darkness inside her, and survived. But the path ahead was no clearer than before. If anything, the journey had just become more uncertain, the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her with greater intensity. Lysandra remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Alice, but it was the kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable. It was a moment of recognition, of understanding. Finally she spoke. "You did not fail, Alice," Lysandra said quietly, her voice carrying the depth of ancient knowledge. "You faced your fear and you overcame it. But remember this, every keeper must face their inner darkness. The Hollowing feeds on that darkness and it will always try to exploit it. You cannot rid yourself of it, but you can learn to control it." Alice nodded slowly, still processing the enormity of her first trial. She had always known that fear and darkness were a part of her, but seeing it materialize in such a way had been overwhelming. The faces, the voices, they had seemed so real, and for a brief moment, Alice had felt herself slipping, almost giving in to them. But she hadn't. She had chosen to stand firm, to reject the narrative they had tried to impose on her. It was a lesson in resilience, but also in humility. Lysandra's voice broke through her reverie, steady and calm. "The second trial will not be as simple as the first. You have faced your fears, Alice. Now you must face your desire, your temptation, your power." Alice raised an eyebrow, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean, my temptation? I already unlocked the heart. What more could I want?" "The heart's power is both a blessing and a curse," Lysandra replied, her tone grave. "It is capable of granting immense strength, but it also tests the will of the one who wields it. To be the keeper, Alice, is to walk a delicate balance. And that balance is threatened by your own desires, by your temptation to use this power for your own gain." A chill ran down Alice's spine as Lysandra's words sank in. She had always known that the heart was dangerous. But had she truly considered what it would mean to wield such power? To control the balance of life and death? She had been so focused on defeating the Hollowing, on protecting the forest, that she had not fully examined the consequences of her actions. "You will have to face that temptation," Lysandra continued. "The heart will show you the things you want most, the things you have always wanted. The desires you have buried deep within you, the power you have always dreamed of, will be placed before you." Alice took a deep breath. "What happens if I give in?" Lysandra's eyes darkened, her expression solemn. "If you give in, the balance will shatter. The heart's power is not meant for personal gain. It is meant to protect the balance of the world. If you use it to fulfill your own desires, to bend the world to your will, you will become the very thing you are fighting against. You will become a part of the Hollowing." The weight of Lysandra's words landed heavily in the air. The Hollowing. The darkness that had nearly consumed her before, the force that threatened to unravel everything she had fought for. Alice felt a coldness settle in her stomach. She had always believed in doing what was right, in using her power to protect the world. But Lysandra was right. Power was a dangerous thing. The very thing that made her strong could also destroy her. "I understand," Alice said, her voice quiet but firm. "I won't let it consume me." Lysandra gave her a nod, her expression softening just slightly. "You must be ready for the next trial, Alice. It will be your greatest test. You will be shown what you desire most. And you must choose to walk away from it or risk losing yourself to it." Alice's gaze hardened with resolve. She had already faced the darkness of her own fear. Now she would have to face the darkness of her own heart. The desire to control, to fix everything, to have the power to save everyone. The temptation to use the heart's power to bring back those she had lost. But that was the very thing she had to fight against. The heart was not meant for selfish gain. It was meant to protect. With a deep breath, Alice turned her attention back to the pedestal, where the heart still pulsed with that rhythmic, golden light. The power it held was enormous, yet it felt distant now, like something just beyond her reach. As if in response to her thoughts, the heart flared brighter for a moment, its pulse quickening. Suddenly, the cavern around Alice seemed to shift again. The walls of the chamber blurred, the stone transforming into mist, and the air grew thick with the smell of something sweet and intoxicating. The golden light of the heart seemed to glow even brighter, casting long, eerie shadows across the chamber. "Alice," a voice echoed, soft but full of authority. "Alice?" She turned sharply, her heart leaping in her chest. The voice wasn't Lysandra's. It was a voice she hadn't heard in years, yet it was as familiar as her own breath. It was her mother's voice, soft and comforting. "Mother?" Alice's voice cracked as she stepped forward, her feet moving almost instinctively toward the source of the voice. The mist parted, revealing a figure standing before her. A woman who looked so much like her mother it took Alice's breath away. Her long dark hair framed her face, her eyes warm, her smile tender. "Mom," Alice whispered, her voice filled with longing. The woman before her stepped forward, her eyes glistening with affection. "Alice," she said softly, reaching out a hand. "I've missed you so much. You don't need to fight this battle alone. Come with me and I'll help you. You can save everything. You can bring them all back. All you have to do is take my hand." Alice's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted so badly to take her mother's hand, to have her back, to end the pain of loss that had haunted her for so long. But something inside her, something deep, told her that this was not right. This was a temptation. This was the heart showing her what she desired most. Her mother's face shifted slightly, her expression darkening just enough for Alice to see the faint, flickering shadows behind her eyes. The mist around her mother grew thicker, the air colder. The voice became insistent, pressing against Alice's mind, tempting her. "Come back, Alice," the voice whispered. "You have the power. The heart can restore what you've lost. You can have everything you've ever dreamed of. All you need to do is take it." But Alice shook her head, her hand trembling but resolute. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I won't use the heart like that. I can't." The mist seemed to recede, and the figure of her mother faded with it, replaced by the empty chamber once more. The warmth that had flooded the space evaporated, leaving Alice standing alone once again, her heart racing. Lysandra stepped forward, watching her closely. "You passed the second trial, Alice. The heart tempted you with what you wanted most. But you chose the path of the keeper, the path of balance." Alice's breath was shallow, her pulse still quick from the intensity of the vision. "I almost gave in," she whispered. "I almost took it. The temptation, it was so strong." "It always is," Lysandra said gently. "But you passed. You chose to protect the balance rather than seek personal gain. This is the heart of the keeper's path, choosing the greater good over your own desires. And in doing so, you have strengthened your resolve." Alice stood there for a long moment, the silence enveloping her. The temptation was gone, but the feeling of power, the vastness of what she had just experienced, lingered. She had faced the darkness within, but there would be more trials ahead. This was far from over. Alice stood silently in the cavern, her pulse still quick from the trials she had faced. The heart of the forest pulsed gently before her, glowing steadily in its pedestal, as if waiting for her next move. Lysandra, ever watchful, stood to her side, her expression unreadable but her eyes filled with quiet approval. The second trial had tested her in ways she hadn't expected. She had faced her deepest desires, the things she longed for most, the return of the people she had lost, the ability to rewrite the past, to make things right. But she had resisted, choosing the path of the keeper over personal gain. It was a victory, yes, but it didn't feel like one. The weight of her decisions hung heavily in the air, the silence pressing against her like a storm waiting to break. Lysandra broke the stillness, her voice calm but full of an ancient gravity. "The heart is not just a tool, Alice. It is an extension of the world's will. The balance you protect is not merely between light and dark, but between all things. You are the keeper, and your decisions now carry the weight of that responsibility." "I understand," Alice replied, her voice steady, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more she needed to understand. She had passed 2 trials, yes, but what would the next trial demand of her? What else could she face that would challenge her so completely? Lysandra's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she had read Alice's thoughts. "You have learned that the heart will tempt you with your fears and your desires. But now it will test your connection to the world itself. You will face a trial of choice, one that will test not just your strength but your will. Will you make the right choice even when it means sacrificing something dear to you?" Alice felt a sharp pang in her chest at the thought. Sacrifice? She had already given so much. She had fought the hollowing, lost people she loved, and given up her own peace for the sake of the world. What more could she possibly be asked to sacrifice? Lysandra stepped closer, her voice soft but unyielding. You will face a choice that may break you, Alice. The heart's power can save or destroy. It can heal, but it can also harm. When you make your choice, remember, the balance is delicate. The consequences of your actions will ripple through the world. Alice nodded slowly, but her mind was a swirl of confusion and fear. What could the heart ask of her that would make her question everything she believed? What was she truly willing to sacrifice to protect the world? The cavern suddenly darkened, the golden light of the heart flickering like a distant flame. The air grew cold, and Alice felt the familiar sensation of being pulled into something beyond herself, something vast and unknowable. The ground beneath her shifted, the stone rising and falling in gentle waves as if the earth itself was alive. Lyssandra's voice echoed in the darkness, but now it felt distant, as if coming from a faraway place. Your trial begins now, Alice. The choice is yours. Before Alice could respond, the cavern was swept away in an instant, replaced by a vision of the forest, but it was not the forest she knew. This was a darker version, a twisted reflection of the world she had fought so hard to protect. The trees loomed tall and gnarled, their bark blackened, their branches like skeletal hands reaching toward the sky. The ground was covered in a thick mist, the air stagnant and oppressive. Alice could feel the pull of the heart's power in her chest, and she knew immediately that this vision was a test. The heart was showing her a version of the world, a world that could come to pass if she made the wrong choice. And there, standing in the center of the twisted forest, was a figure she never expected to see. Her mother. But this was not the mother Alice had known. This woman's face was pale and drawn, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light, her expression filled with cold, empty certainty. Mother? Alice's voice caught in her throat. What is this? Her mother's lips twisted into a thin smile, one that held no warmth, only a chilling sort of finality. You have come to make a choice, Alice. A choice that will decide the fate of the world. Her voice was smooth and haunting, like the whisper of the wind through dead trees. Alice stepped forward, her heart pounding. This wasn't her mother, this couldn't be. But the figure before her was undeniably familiar. The features were the same, the voice the same, even the way her mother tilted her head as if searching for something. You see, Alice, the figure continued, you have the power to bring the balance back. You can restore the forest, restore the heart. But there is a cost. The heart cannot save everything. There is only so much it can do. The hollowing is not the only danger that threatens the world. There are worse things, things that no one can see yet. Worse things. Alice echoed, fear creeping into her voice. What do you mean? What are you asking of me? Her mother's smile grew, but it was a smile filled with something darker now. I am offering you a choice, Alice. I can make it all go away, the hollowing, the pain, the loss. I can help you. You can make it so that nothing ever had to happen. You can go back, change it all. All you have to do is let go of the heart. The words hung in the air, impossible, unthinkable. Alice took a step back, her mind racing. You want me to give up the heart? But that would undo everything I've fought for. I can't. The figure of her mother raised a hand, and suddenly the forest around Alice began to shift. The gnarled trees dissolved into the shadows, and in their place, the vision of her home appeared. Her childhood home, the one she had lost so long ago. The same cozy kitchen, the warm fire crackling in the hearth. The same smell of her mother's cooking wafted through the air. You can have it all back, Alice, her mother coaxed, her voice soft, warm, like the embrace of a long-lost memory. The heart's power is not just to save this world, it can create a new one. A perfect one where everything is as it should be. Alice's breath caught in her throat. The offer was so tempting, too tempting. She could go back to a world where she had never lost her parents, a world where the hollowing had never come. A world where there was no darkness, no fear. A world where she had never had to be the keeper. The heart's power surged within her, responding to the vision, to the temptation. She could feel its pull, the pull to use the power for herself, to fix everything that had gone wrong. But deep down, a part of her, the part that had resisted the hollowing's call, whispered the truth. This was wrong. She could not go back. She could not rewrite history. The cost of such a choice would be too great, too far-reaching. No, Alice whispered, her voice breaking. This isn't right. I can't make this choice. I can't undo what's been done. Her mother's figure flickered, then darkened, the warmth and familiarity evaporating like smoke in the wind. The vision of her home, her family, shattered before her eyes, replaced by a cold, empty void. The air around Alice became thick with the oppressive weight of the heart's power, the weight of the choice she had just made. She had rejected the temptation to use the heart for personal gain, to reshape the past. She had chosen the path of the keeper, the path of balance. But the cost of that choice was now clearer than ever. The figure of her mother was gone, replaced by Lysandra, who stood silently at her side. You passed the trial, Alice. You rejected the temptation, the desire to control the heart for your own benefit. You chose the path of the keeper. Alice's heart was heavy with the realization that she had made a choice that would shape the future. But she knew it wasn't over. There would be more choices, more trials ahead. The heart's power was vast, and its cost was steep. And the path she had chosen would require more from her than she could possibly imagine. The mist lifted around Alice as she stood alone, but the weight of the trial she had just endured clung to her like a shroud. The forest vision had faded, and the shadows that had once crept into her mind were gone. Her mother's face, the twisted offer, the pull to rewrite her past, all of it was slipping away, leaving only the gnawing awareness of the choices still ahead. She was the keeper now. But the path was not as clear as she had hoped. Every decision she made, every step she took, would carry consequences far beyond her understanding. The heart was powerful, yes, but its power was not a simple thing. It was a force that demanded not only strength but wisdom. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her chest like a stone. Lysandra's presence was a constant at her side, but now it felt more like a reminder of what Alice had yet to learn. The quiet power of the heart hummed softly in the distance, pulsing with the energy of the world itself, waiting for Alice to continue her journey. You did well, Alice, Lysandra said, her voice soft but firm. You rejected the temptation of the heart. You chose the greater good over your own desires. But now we move to the final trial. It will not be an easy one. Alice's brow furrowed as she turned toward Lysandra. The final trial? What else is there for me to face? I've already faced my fears, my desires. What more could the heart ask of me? Lysandra's gaze darkened as she regarded Alice, her eyes filled with something like sorrow. The final trial will ask the hardest question of all, Alice. It will test not your strength or your resolve, but your very soul. The heart is not just a tool of power, it is a reflection of the world's balance, a balance that is fragile and ever-shifting. And you, as the keeper, are the one who must uphold it. But this balance is not always clear. It is not always black and white. Alice swallowed, her throat dry. The weight of Lysandra's words sank deep into her bones. The heart had already shown her the cost of wielding such power, the temptation to control, to change the past. But what did Lysandra mean by the balance being fragile? What could she possibly be asked to choose now? Lysandra's expression softened, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. The final trial is one of choice, Alice. You must decide what is more important to you, your own survival or the survival of the world itself. Survival of the world? Alice repeated, the words a strange echo in her mind. What do you mean? I've already made that choice. I'm the keeper. I've chosen to protect the balance. You have chosen, Lysandra said quietly. But the heart's power is not infinite. There is a limit to what it can do. If you use it recklessly, if you allow it to consume you, you will lose everything. The balance will break, and with it, the world will unravel. Alice's breath hitched. What are you saying? Are you telling me that I have to choose between myself and the world? That I will have to sacrifice everything? Lysandra nodded gravely, her gaze unwavering. The heart's power is linked to the very life force of the world. It sustains the forest, the land, the creatures within it. But if you push too far, if you take more than you should, the heart will consume what it touches, and the world will wither. Alice felt a chill grip her heart. The thought of it, of losing the very forest, the land, the creatures she had fought so hard to protect, was unbearable. She had always believed that the heart was a force for good, something that could save the world. But now she understood, it was not invincible. Its power came with a price that could destroy everything if not handled with care. This is the final test, Alice, Lysandra continued, her voice low and steady. You must decide how much you are willing to sacrifice. Will you take the heart's power to its limit, risking everything? Or will you choose to protect the balance, even if it means giving up something you hold dear? Alice's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling as she processed Lysandra's words. She had always believed that the heart's power was the key to saving the world. But now it was clear that there were limits to what she could do. The heart was not an endless well of power, it was a fragile force that required careful stewardship, and the cost of using it recklessly was too great. She had already sacrificed so much, her peace, her home, the people she loved. But was that enough? Was she willing to give up even more to protect the world? The cavern around her seemed to shift again, the walls stretching outward like a vast, unending void. The heart pulsed louder, its golden light flickering in time with her heartbeat. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, suffocating her. She could feel the power of the heart within her, the promise of its potential, its ability to change everything. But at what cost? Her mind flicked to the faces of the people she had lost, the memories of her family, the warmth of her mother's embrace, the safety of her home. She had been willing to fight for the world, to protect the balance, but now it seemed like that fight might demand everything from her. The choice lay before her, clear but insurmountable. What would she choose? Her duty as the keeper, or her own survival? Could she bear to make the ultimate sacrifice to preserve the balance, even if it meant losing everything? The cavern grew colder, and Alice could feel the heart's power pushing at the edges of her mind, urging her to make a decision. The whispers returned, soft but insistent, like the sound of the wind through the trees. Choose, Alice. Choose. Lysandra's voice cut through the haze. The choice is yours, Alice, and the consequences will follow. Alice closed her eyes, the weight of the decision threatening to crush her. She had faced so many trials, each one pushing her closer to this moment. But now, standing on the precipice of the final trial, she realized that the path ahead was not just a test of strength or will, it was a test of heart. She had chosen to protect the balance, but the balance was fragile, and protecting it would come at a cost. She had given up so much already, but would it be enough? Could she walk away from the heart's power if it meant saving the world? The answer, she realized, wasn't clear-cut. The heart had shown her the darkness within her, the desires that threatened to consume her, but it had also shown her the light, the promise of saving the world, of bringing peace and harmony. But there was no easy path. Alice's breath caught as she took a step forward, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. The heart pulsed before her, its golden light beckoning her, but she knew the time had come to make a choice. She could not wait any longer. The world was waiting, and with it, the fate of everything she loved. It was time to decide. The silence of the cavern was almost deafening. The heart's pulse had slowed, now a rhythmic thrum in the distance, barely perceptible but ever-present. It was as if the cavern itself held its breath, waiting for Alice to make her decision. The weight of the choice before her, her survival versus the survival of the world, was a burden that none could truly understand unless they stood in her place. She could feel the heart, its immense power like an ocean, endless and unyielding, pressing against her soul, urging her to reach out, to take it. But as she stood there, her eyes fixed on the glowing stone in the center of the room, something else gnawed at her, a deep sense of responsibility. Lysandra's words echoed in her mind, clearer now than ever before. The balance is fragile. If you use the heart's power recklessly, you risk everything. Her breath caught in her throat as the vision of her past flashed before her eyes. The hollowing, the terror it brought to the world, the shattered memories of her family. She had already lost so much. Could she truly give up more? Was she willing to sacrifice herself, or even others, to protect the balance? The vision of her mother reappeared briefly, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. Her mother's face had been twisted with desperation, urging Alice to take the heart's power and rewrite the past. You can change everything, Alice. You can fix it all. You can make it right. But Alice now understood something profound. The past was not hers to change. Every step she had taken to this point had been in service of the present, the balance that held the world together. To change the past was to risk unraveling everything she had worked for. A sharp pang of guilt sliced through her chest. She had made so many choices in the heat of the moment, hoping they would lead to a better world. But the consequences were beginning to become clear now. Each action had its ripple, each decision a weight on her soul. Was it enough? Alice turned away from the heart, her eyes closing as she wrestled with the emotions that surged inside her. Fear, loss, regret, desperation. She could still feel the pull of the heart's power, the desire to use it, to bend the world to her will. The temptation was so close, so easy. But would that make her any different from the hollowing? Lysandra's voice broke through her thoughts. Alice, you cannot do this alone. If you take this power, you will bear the burden of it for the rest of your life. The heart will change you. It will mold you into something different, something other than what you are now. Alice turned to her, her voice steady but strained. But if I don't take it, if I don't act, what happens then? Will the world fall apart? Will everything we've worked for come undone? Lysandra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward, her gaze filled with empathy. You have acted, Alice. You have already chosen. The heart will not act on its own. It is a reflection of you, of your choices. But there are limits. The balance of the world was never meant to be one person's responsibility alone. It is a collective force, an interwoven tapestry that requires care, respect, and most importantly, humility. Alice's heart tightened. She had known this, hadn't she? She had known from the beginning that the weight of the world wasn't hers to bear alone. But she had taken it on anyway. She had sought the heart's power, believing that it was the key to saving everything. And now, it felt as though that choice had led her here, at the precipice of losing everything. "I've already lost so much," Alice whispered, her voice barely audible. "My family, my home, everything I've ever known. How can I stand by and watch the world crumble too? How can I walk away from the heart now?" Lysandra's eyes softened, filled with an understanding that reached deep into Alice's soul. The world is not yours to save alone. The heart is not the answer to all of life's struggles. It is a tool, yes, but it is not a crutch and it is not a weapon. It is a keeper just as you are. The heart protects balance. But balance can only be maintained when all forces, light and dark, growth and decay, life and death, are allowed to exist in their natural order. Alice took a step back, her hands shaking slightly as she clenched them into fists. She couldn't let go of the desire to protect, to save. It was so ingrained in her, so deep within her soul, that the thought of letting it go felt like tearing out a piece of herself. "I don't want to lose the world," Alice said, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't want to watch everything fall apart like it did before. I can't just let that happen." Lysandra's gaze softened, but her words were firm. "It will not fall apart, Alice. The world is more resilient than you think. It will endure. You have already given it your strength, your will. The heart is only one part of the balance. The rest of the world will take care of itself as long as you do not let your fear control you. Fear is what brought the hollowing into existence, remember?" Alice nodded slowly, the truth of Lysandra's words sinking in. Fear. It had been her greatest enemy from the start, the force that had led her to make rash decisions, to pursue the heart's power without fully understanding what it meant. It was fear that had clouded her judgment. Fear that had made her desperate for a solution, for an easy answer. But she had learned something important, something she hadn't fully understood until now. The heart was not an answer. It was not a solution to be wielded. It was a force that needed to be respected, one that required patience and balance. And it was a force that required the keeper to be wise, not just strong. With a deep breath, Alice turned back toward the pedestal, her gaze steady. She could still feel the heart's pull, but now it no longer felt like a temptation. It was a reminder of the balance she was meant to protect. "I've made my choice," Alice said, her voice clear. "I won't use the heart for my own gain. I won't let my fear shape the world. I choose the balance." Lysandra's expression softened, the sadness in her eyes replaced with a quiet pride. "Then you are ready, Alice. You have passed the trials. You have learned what it means to be the keeper." For a long moment, Alice stood in the cavern, her eyes fixed on the heart of the forest. The golden light pulsed softly, steady and constant, like the heartbeat of the world itself. It was not an enemy, nor was it a weapon. It was a force, a reflection of everything Alice had fought for. The balance. She was the keeper now, but more than that, she was part of the world. A part of the balance that she had vowed to protect. And as she turned and began walking away from the heart, the cavern seemed to breathe with her, as if acknowledging the decision she had made. The journey wasn't over, but it was a beginning. Alice's footsteps echoed through the cavern as she moved away from the heart, the soft glow of its light fading behind her. The air, once thick with tension, felt lighter now, as if the weight of the decisions made had been lifted, even if only slightly. Her body still hummed with the remnants of the heart's power, but she had chosen to leave it behind for now, to let the balance of the world unfold naturally. The pull was still there, deep within her, but it was no longer the desperate hunger she had once felt. It was a quiet understanding, a subtle sense of peace. Lysandra walked beside her, her gaze thoughtful, but her expression soft. "You have chosen well, Alice," she said, her voice gentle yet filled with the gravity of truth. "The heart is not a tool to be wielded lightly. It is a reflection of all things, light and dark, growth and decay. You have not only chosen the balance of the world but your place within it." Alice nodded, still processing everything that had happened. The trials had been more than just tests of strength or will, they had been lessons in understanding. Understanding the depth of the heart's power. Understanding the dangers of unchecked desires. Understanding her own limits. For so long, Alice had believed that she needed to control everything. To fix what had been broken. To save what had been lost. But now, as she stood at the threshold of this vast, mysterious world, she realized that some things were never meant to be fixed. Some things had to be allowed to unfold in their own time without interference. The cavern's walls seemed to shift as they walked, the stone glowing faintly as if acknowledging Alice's decision. She could feel the subtle vibrations beneath her feet, the pulse of the heart still present in the distant reaches of the cavern, but it was no longer the center of her world. The world was bigger than the heart, and she was bigger than her past mistakes. "This place," Alice said softly as they moved through the twisting paths of the cavern, "it feels different now, like the air is lighter." Lysandra glanced at her with a knowing smile. "You are different, Alice. The heart has tested you and you have emerged stronger. The balance is still fragile, but now you are its keeper. The world will feel your choices. And though the trials are not over, your role has been defined. You will face challenges, of course, but you will meet them with wisdom, not fear." Alice thought about that as they walked. Wisdom, not fear. It sounded simple, yet it felt like the hardest thing she would ever have to do. But the path ahead felt clearer now. She no longer needed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. She was a part of the balance, not the sole bearer of its burden. As they reached the edge of the cavern, the walls opened up into a wide, expansive forest, a place Alice had seen in glimpses through dreams and visions. The trees stood tall and strong, their branches stretching toward the sky, their leaves whispering in the wind. There was a palpable energy in the air, a hum of life that resonated deeply with her. This was the forest she had come to protect, the forest she had fought for. And though the heart's glow had faded, it was still there, deep within the very earth beneath her feet, in the roots of the trees, in the wind that rustled through the leaves. Lysandra stopped beside her, her eyes soft as she watched Alice take it all in. "The heart is still here, Alice. It is not in the stone, not in the pedestal. It is in everything. In the trees, in the soil, in the winds that carry the scent of rain. The heart's power flows through the world just as it flows through you." Alice closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the forest wash over her. The chirp of distant birds, the rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the soft murmur of water trickling somewhere nearby. For the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of belonging. She wasn't just protecting the world. She was part of it. She had always been and she always would be. "I think I understand now," Alice said, her voice full of quiet wonder. "The balance is not something to control. It's something to nurture, to protect." Lysandra nodded, her expression proud. "Exactly. The heart is a force of nature, not a possession. It is the world itself. It cannot be controlled, nor should it be. Your role as keeper is to protect the balance, not to dominate it. To ensure that it thrives in all its complexity." Alice's gaze drifted to the distant horizon, where the sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, the last remnants of the setting sun casting a warm glow across the landscape. It was a peaceful sight, one that filled her with hope and determination. "I still don't know what comes next," Alice said, her voice thoughtful. "I've learned so much, but the world is so much bigger than I realized. The heart is just one piece of the puzzle." Lysandra smiled, her eyes gleaming with wisdom. "That's the truth, Alice. The world is vast and there is much to learn. Your trials have shown you the dangers of desire, the importance of balance, and the weight of responsibility. But there is still much more to discover. The heart may have chosen you, but the world will also reveal its secrets to you in time. The path of the keeper is not one of certainty, but of continual growth." Alice let out a breath, feeling the weight of the journey ahead but also a newfound sense of peace. She no longer felt like a child scrambling for control. She understood that this journey, this life, was not about having all the answers. It was about embracing the unknown, understanding the nuances of the world, and trusting herself to navigate it. "We'll have to face the hollowing again," Alice murmured, her brow furrowed with concern. "The heart's power may have been enough to hold it at bay for now, but it's still out there. I can feel it." Lysandra's expression darkened slightly, a shadow crossing her face. "Yes, the hollowing is not defeated. It is merely dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike. And while you have passed the trials, your true test will come when it rises again. You will have to be ready." Alice felt a chill settle over her, but this time it was not fear. It was the cold realization that her journey had just begun. The heart had shown her glimpses of the balance, the delicate, ever-shifting equilibrium that held the world together. But there was still so much to learn, so much to face. "I'm ready," Alice said, her voice firm. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone. She was part of something greater. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would meet them with the wisdom she had earned and the strength she had found within herself. The forest before her shimmered with the promise of new beginnings, of challenges yet to come. But for the first time, Alice felt at peace with the uncertainty. The heart was no longer a burden, it was a guide. And with it she would walk forward, step by step, toward whatever the world had in store. The sky above was shifting, dark clouds gathering like the gathering of some unseen storm. But Alice didn't feel the weight of it anymore. No, she had come to understand that the storm was a natural part of the world. The heart had shown her that too. Everything in its essence was both light and dark, life and death. All were necessary, all were intertwined. And as the keeper, it was her job to nurture that balance, to stand between the two forces, neither succumbing to the allure of the light nor the shadows. But the hollowing still loomed unseen just beyond the edges of the world. Alice felt it like a whisper on the wind, a presence just waiting to strike, ready to push the balance once more into chaos. The heart had not defeated it, it had merely held it at bay. And now, Alice's journey would take her deeper into that mystery, to confront the hollowing when it inevitably returned. Lysandra's words echoed in her mind. The hollowing is not gone, Alice. It is merely dormant. You have not defeated it, only delayed it. When it rises again, you will need all the strength you have gained and more. Her eyes shifted to the horizon, where the sun had begun to dip below the trees, painting the sky in fiery hues of red and gold. The forest around her stirred as if in response to her thoughts. The leaves rustled, the distant calls of birds echoed through the trees, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. Lysandra had said the world would reveal its secrets to Alice in time, but she hadn't said how long that time would be. It was clear now that the world was vast, and the path ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be new allies to meet, new dangers to face, and the knowledge that at any moment, the hollowing could return to unravel all that Alice had worked for. But Alice wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had made her choice, and though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't face it alone. She had learned that from the heart, from Lysandra, and from the trials she had passed. The keeper was part of the balance, yes, but she was also connected to the world. She could lean on the strength of the earth, the forest, the creatures that called it home. She could rely on the wisdom she had earned. She would carry the heart within her, not as a burden, but as a guide. And it was time to move forward, to seek out the truths of the world, to prepare for the hollowing's return. Alice, Lysandra spoke, breaking her reverie. Her voice was as steady as ever, but there was a trace of something different in her eyes, something that Alice hadn't noticed before. A glimmer of expectation. Alice turned to her, slightly startled. "What is it?" Lysandra's eyes softened. "The time has come for you to leave this place. The cavern, the heart, it has all been part of your trials. But now the real journey begins. You must venture beyond the forest, beyond this land, to places you've never known. The world is bigger than you realize. There are forces at play, forces you must understand before the hollowing rises again." Alice felt a slight pang in her chest, but the urgency in Lysandra's tone drove it away. This was not the time for hesitation. She had learned, in the deepest parts of herself, that the journey was not about comfort. It was about growth. And growth meant stepping out of the familiar, stepping into the unknown. "You mean to say, I'm leaving the forest?" Alice asked, her voice quieter now. It felt strange, the thought of leaving behind the place that had protected her, that had taught her what it meant to be the keeper. But Lysandra's nod confirmed it. "The world beyond the trees is where you'll find the answers you seek," Lysandra said, her voice rich with meaning. "The hollowing is not a single force. It is a consequence of something greater, something that has been in motion for centuries. It's time for you to learn what that is. You must go to the places where the balance is most fragile, where the boundaries between light and dark blur, where the forces of chaos gather." Alice felt a chill rise within her. The world beyond the forest was an unknown. There were stories, whispers, of places where the land was twisted, corrupted by dark magic. Some said the hollowing was not a singular entity, but a force that fed on the weakness of the world, on places where life and death were no longer in harmony. "I'm ready," Alice said, her voice steady. The words felt like a promise she had made to herself, to the world, and to everything that had led her here. Lysandra smiled, a small but knowing curve of her lips. "I know you are, Alice. But remember, the world is not what it seems. It is far more complex than you know. There are other keepers, other powers, other truths. It will not be easy, and there will be moments when you will question everything you know." Alice took a deep breath, the weight of Lysandra's words sinking into her. She had already faced so much. But it was clear that the hardest part of her journey was still to come. The balance was a fragile thing, and though she had chosen to protect it, she would now be forced to confront the forces that threatened it. The hollowing, the corruption, the darkness, it was out there. And if she didn't act, if she didn't learn what she needed to, the world would fall into ruin. Where do I start? Alice asked. Lysandra looked off into the distance, her gaze far away, as if she were contemplating something beyond this moment. There is a place, a city, where the borders between light and dark are thinnest. It is a place where magic and corruption have lived side by side for centuries. It is known as Narloth. Alice frowned. Narloth? I've never heard of it. You will, Lysandra said softly. It is a place of great power, and its inhabitants hold secrets that may hold the key to understanding the Hollowing. But Narloth is also a dangerous place. Many who go there never return. It is a city built on lies and half-truths, where darkness wears the guise of light. Alice's heart beat faster. Narloth, a city where light and dark coexisted? Where darkness wore the face of something good. It sounded like a place from her nightmares, a place where nothing could be trusted. But this was her path. This was where she needed to go to find answers. I'll go, Alice said, determination setting in. I'll find Narloth and learn what I need to. I'll stop the Hollowing. Lysandra placed a hand on her shoulder, her grip firm, grounding Alice in that moment. You're ready, Alice. Just remember, the world is not what it seems. And you must trust your instincts. The heart has given you its power, but only you can decide how to wield it. As Alice nodded, she felt the weight of Lysandra's words. The heart's power was hers, yes. But it wasn't just about wielding power, it was about knowing when and where to use it. It was about balance. And balance wasn't just in the world, it was in herself. She turned, ready to face the unknown. The sun had nearly set now, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the ground, but ahead of her lay the path forward. The journey to Narloth. Alice didn't look back. She had made her choice, and now it was time to walk it. The twilight deepened as Alice walked, the last remnants of the sun slipping below the horizon. The air, crisp and cool, seemed to whisper with anticipation, as though the very forest was aware of the choice she had made. Her feet moved steadily along the familiar path, yet her heart was heavy with the gravity of what lay ahead. The journey to Narloth would not be an easy one. Lysandra had spoken of it in cryptic terms. Darkness wearing the guise of light, magic and corruption coexisting, a city built on lies and half-truths. The very thought of a place so tangled in mystery unsettled Alice. But there was no turning back now. The forest stretched out before her, a quiet expanse of towering trees and shadowed paths. It felt almost as though the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what she would do next. The heart's influence still pulsed faintly in her chest, but it was quieter now, less insistent. She had chosen the path of the keeper. She had chosen balance. But balance was not something that could be maintained without effort. She had already learned that the world was far more complex than she had ever imagined. There were forces beyond the heart, beyond the forest, that sought to tip the scales. The Hollowing, yes, but it wasn't just that. There were other powers at play, ancient forces, forgotten gods, and cities where magic ran like blood in the veins of the earth. Narloth was one of those places. Alice had no idea what awaited her there, but she knew it was where she needed to go. To learn. To grow. To understand. The trees around her began to thicken, their trunks growing wider, their roots stretching out like dark fingers across the earth. The canopy overhead blocked out the last of the evening light, casting the path into shadow. The forest had always felt alive to Alice, but now it seemed different. There was a subtle shift in the air, a stirring of something ancient that she couldn't quite grasp. She paused for a moment, her breath misting in the cool air, and turned her gaze back to Lysandra. The keeper stood at the edge of the forest, her expression unreadable but her presence steady. "Are you sure about this?" Lysandra asked, her voice soft but edged with concern. Alice nodded, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't name. "I don't know what to expect, but I know I have to go. This is the only way to stop the Hollowing for good." Lysandra gave her a long look, her ancient eyes searching Alice's face, as if weighing her soul. Finally, she gave a nod of approval, her face softening. "Very well. But remember, Alice, there is much you don't know about Narloth. Much that can change you. It is a city that has lived in the shadows for so long that it is hard to tell what is truth and what is illusion." "I understand," Alice replied, her voice steady. She wasn't afraid of the unknown, not anymore. She had learned that fear was only a shadow itself, something to be faced and walked through, not avoided. Lysandra stepped forward and placed her hand on Alice's shoulder, her grip firm but reassuring. "Then go and trust yourself. The heart is with you even if you don't feel its pull. Its power is not just in the stone but in you. In your choices. In your heart. Alice nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle in her chest. It wasn't just the heart that would guide her. It was her own heart, her choices. The balance would not be maintained by magic alone, but by the wisdom and courage she chose to carry forward. With a final glance at Lysandra, Alice turned and stepped deeper into the forest. The path before her seemed endless, but for the first time she wasn't looking for an end. She was looking for answers, for the truth, for the balance. The forest around her seemed to open up, the dense thicket of trees giving way to a winding path that led toward the distant mountains. As she moved forward, the ground beneath her feet became rougher, the underbrush more sparse. The trees here were older, their trunks gnarled and twisted, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and earth. The sounds of the forest had changed too, no longer the quiet rustling of leaves, but the distant howls of unseen creatures, the snapping of branches in the undergrowth, the sharp cry of a hawk in the distance. Alice's senses sharpened as she moved through the forest, her pace steady and unhurried. She could feel the world around her, the pulse of life and death that flowed through the land, but there was something else now, something darker, more menacing. It was as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The journey to Narloth would take time. Days, weeks, maybe longer. Alice had no idea what lay between here and there, only that the path ahead was fraught with danger, and yet it felt right. She was on the path she was meant to follow. She had not been walking long when a sound caught her attention. It was faint at first, a soft rustle in the distance, followed by the crackle of dry leaves. Her senses flared, and she instinctively slowed her pace, listening intently. The noise grew louder, closer. Something was coming. Alice's hand instinctively moved to the dagger at her belt. It was a simple weapon, but it had served her well during the trials. She could feel its weight, the cold metal reminding her of the strength she had cultivated. The sound grew louder, closer. There was something about the rhythm of it that unsettled her. Too deliberate, too calculated. She stepped off the path into the shadows of the trees, her breath quiet and steady. Her senses reached out, probing the darkness, waiting for whatever was approaching. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath, as though it too was waiting. Then, through the mist of the trees, she saw them. Figures. Cloaked in shadow, their forms shrouded in dark, tattered robes. They moved with an eerie, fluid grace, their steps silent, like whispers in the night. Alice couldn't see their faces, but she could feel the malice in the air, the presence of something ancient and powerful. She stood still, watching them, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea who or what these figures were, but one thing was clear: they were not ordinary travelers. Their movements, their very presence, seemed to distort the world around them, as if reality itself bent in their wake. One of them turned, and Alice's breath caught in her throat. It was a man, tall and gaunt, his skin pale like the moon, and his eyes. Alice's stomach twisted at the sight. His eyes were empty, hollow, dark pits that seemed to swallow the light. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Alice felt a coldness seep into her bones, a shiver that rattled her very core. The figure smiled then, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver of dread through her. Going somewhere? His voice was smooth like velvet, but it held an edge, a bite to it. Alice's fingers tightened around the hilt of her dagger. "I'm just passing through," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of challenge. The man's smile widened, his hollow eyes narrowing as he took a step toward her. "You are going somewhere, aren't you? Heading to Narloth, perhaps? A place full of secrets, truths you are not ready to understand." Alice's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know about Narloth?" The man chuckled softly, his voice low and mocking. "Oh, child, the world is full of secrets. And Narloth holds many, more than even you can imagine." He took another step forward, and Alice could feel the oppressive weight of his presence, like a shadow pressing against her chest. "Why don't you come with us?" he offered, his tone smooth, persuasive. "You have no idea what you're walking into. You'll need guidance, and we are happy to provide it." Alice's grip on her dagger tightened, her instinct screaming at her. She had not come this far only to fall into some trap. "Not interested," Alice replied, her voice firm. She took a step back, ready to defend herself if needed. The figures seemed to watch her, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, but they did not move. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the man smiled again, though it held none of the warmth of before. It was an empty, knowing grin. "Very well," he said softly. "But remember this, Alice of the forest. The path you walk is not your own. There are others who walk it with you. And not all of them are as they seem." With that, the figures turned, fading into the darkness of the forest as silently as they had appeared. Alice stood frozen, her heart racing in her chest, her hands still clutching the dagger. She didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but their warning felt like a shadow that would follow her for some time. She took a deep breath, slowly releasing the tension in her shoulders. The forest had just shown her a glimpse of the unknown, and though it unsettled her, she knew this was just the beginning. The figures had vanished into the shadows as though they had never been there at all. Alice stood alone once more in the eerie stillness of the forest, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant rustling of unseen creatures. Her heart still raced, the cold chill of their presence lingering in her chest. She knew they weren't ordinary travelers. The way they moved, the way they spoke, it all felt unnatural, wrong. The gaunt man's hollow eyes, his cryptic words about Narloth, it all seemed too much like a warning. But what kind of warning? Who were they? The forest around her felt different now, as though the very trees were watching her, their ancient branches creaking in the wind like whispering voices. Alice shuddered, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her bones. She had faced fear before, had learned to confront the darkness within her and around her. But this felt different. This was a warning of something far older, something that even the heart had not revealed to her. She couldn't stand here forever, lost in thoughts of the unknown. The path to Narloth still lay ahead, and she had no intention of turning back now. She had made her choice. But the encounter with those cloaked figures had only added another layer of uncertainty to her journey. It felt like they were right. She was walking a path that wasn't entirely her own, and there were others, forces hidden in the darkness, that would shape her fate. The air had grown colder, and the night was settling in deeper, the forest growing quieter as though holding its breath. Alice couldn't shake the feeling that the land itself had changed in some subtle, unexplainable way since the encounter. The sounds of the forest seemed muffled, like the very atmosphere had thickened around her. As she continued walking, her hands still clutching the dagger at her belt, she couldn't help but glance nervously over her shoulder, expecting to see those figures reappear from the shadows. But the path behind her remained empty, dark, and silent. The wind whispered through the trees, and Alice pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. It wasn't much, but it offered a small comfort against the chill creeping into her skin. The darkness of the forest seemed to stretch endlessly before her, the trees growing taller and more gnarled with each step, as though they were pulling her deeper into their embrace. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only moments, Alice couldn't tell. Time had lost its meaning here, in the wild, untamed woods where the shadows seemed to stretch endlessly. The sky above had long since disappeared behind a thick canopy of trees, and the only light now came from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the leaves in scattered beams, casting long, twisted shadows on the ground. Then she saw it. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, there was a faint glow, a soft, flickering light. It was too far to be the stars, too steady to be a firefly. It was a light that beckoned her, like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship through a storm. Her breath caught in her throat. She had been walking for hours, and she hadn't expected to see any signs of civilization this deep into the forest. Was it a trap? Another illusion like the ones the cloaked figures had warned her about? Alice paused, her mind racing. The instinct to continue forward, to follow the light, was strong. But she knew she couldn't afford to be reckless. Not now. She had already faced one danger, and there could be more ahead. The warnings of the cloaked figures echoed in her mind. The path you walk is not your own. She didn't know who or what they were, but their words were not something she could ignore. Still, there was something almost magnetic about that light. It felt like the right thing to do, like it was meant for her, leading her toward something important. "Stay focused," Alice muttered to herself, her voice barely more than a whisper in the silence of the forest. She took a deep breath, her grip tightening on the dagger as she steeled herself for whatever lay ahead. She began walking again, carefully making her way through the dense trees. The light grew brighter as she approached, until she could make out a shape. A structure, perhaps, a small building hidden among the trees. It was strange, like a cottage or an old cabin, but the light emanating from it didn't seem to be coming from a traditional source, like a lantern or a fire. It was more ethereal, a soft, glowing mist that surrounded the small house, casting an eerie light on the forest around it. The cottage was weathered, its walls covered in thick vines and moss, the wood darkened by age and neglect. The windows were cracked, and the door hung ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. It looked abandoned, but still that light. It beckoned. Alice paused at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a cluster of trees, watching the building. She could feel something, an energy, a presence, coming from it, but she couldn't tell whether it was a force of good or something darker. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, moving cautiously toward the door. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground beneath her was pulling her toward the unknown. She stopped just in front of the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. And then she heard it. A soft voice, a whisper so faint it was almost drowned out by the wind. "Come in, Alice." Her blood ran cold. The voice was familiar, but she couldn't place it. It wasn't Lysandra. It wasn't her mother. The voice was distant, but there was something comforting about it, too. It was the kind of voice that made you feel like you were home, safe, and at the same time like it had been waiting for you. The door swung open wider, almost inviting her in. The light flickered, casting dancing shadows across the ground, and Alice felt a pull in her chest, a magnetic force drawing her inside. But then the warning from the cloaked figures returned to her mind. The path you walk is not your own. There are others who walk it with you, and not all of them are as they seem. Her hand gripped the dagger tighter, her breath shallow. The voice, the light, it was all so tempting, so inviting. But Alice knew better than to trust the unknown. She took a step back, her instincts telling her to leave, to turn away and keep walking. But something kept her rooted to the spot. It was as if the forest itself had wrapped its tendrils around her, holding her in place. The whisper came again, stronger this time, clearer. "Come inside. It's safer here." The force of it was almost overwhelming, and Alice felt her resolve begin to crack. She was so close to something, to the answer she sought. Narloth, the hollowing, the heart, all of it was tied together somehow. She couldn't afford to stop now. But would going inside this mysterious cottage be the right choice? Alice's heart pounded, the battle between instinct and curiosity waging within her. Should she trust this strange place? Or would it be another trap, another step down a dangerous path? Finally, after a long, tense moment, Alice made her choice. With a sharp breath, she turned and stepped away from the door, her senses alert. "I'm not coming in," she muttered to herself, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something had just been lost. She continued walking, away from the cottage, deeper into the forest. The whispering stopped. The light began to fade, but its pull lingered in her chest. And still the journey to Narloth awaited. The forest around Alice seemed to grow even darker as she moved away from the mysterious cottage. The light had faded completely now, swallowed by the thick trees and dense underbrush. The air, once cool and crisp, now felt heavy, as though it carried a weight that pressed in from all sides. She could still feel the pull of the place, the magnetic force that had tried to lure her inside, but she resisted it. The whispering voice lingered in her mind, like a half-remembered dream, its soft murmurs too faint to understand but too persistent to ignore. "Come inside. It's safer here." Alice shook her head, pushing the thoughts aside. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to fall for whatever illusion the forest had conjured. Her path lay ahead, not behind. The cottage was a distraction, a shadow in the night that could lead her astray. Still, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Had she made the right decision? What if there was something important inside that cottage, something she needed to find? What if it had answers that could help her on her journey? She had no way of knowing for sure, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. But Alice kept walking, her steps steady, each one carrying her farther from the strange building. The forest around her seemed to close in, the trees growing closer together, their branches twisting like long, gnarled fingers reaching down to touch her. The path was less clear now, the underbrush thickening and the ground becoming more uneven. The deeper she went, the more isolated she felt, as though the world was closing in around her, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Time had lost all meaning. She wasn't sure how long she had been walking, hours, perhaps days, when she finally reached a clearing. The trees parted to reveal a large stone archway, covered in ivy and moss, its surface weathered by time. The archway stood in stark contrast to the wild forest around it, as if it had been built long ago and abandoned, forgotten by the world. Alice stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she examined the archway. There was something undeniably ancient about it, something that made her feel both a sense of awe and trepidation. She could feel the pulse of magic in the air, a faint hum that seemed to resonate with the very earth beneath her feet. This place, like the heart, held power. But it was a power she didn't fully understand. A chill ran down her spine, and for the first time in a long while, Alice hesitated. Her hand instinctively reached for the dagger at her belt, its familiar weight offering a small measure of comfort. But as her fingers brushed the hilt, she realized something. The dagger, the heart, it wasn't enough to protect her from the unknown forces that were drawing her deeper into this world. No weapon, no magic could prepare her for what lay beyond the archway. And yet, she knew she had to go forward. With a deep breath, Alice stepped through the archway, the cool air parting around her like a veil. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier, the silence more profound. It was as if the world had gone quiet, holding its breath in anticipation. Alice's senses sharpened, her body tensing as she scanned her surroundings. Beyond the archway was another path, winding through dense woods, but the trees here were different. They were taller, their trunks twisted in unnatural shapes, their roots crawling across the ground like veins. The leaves above were thick and dark, casting the path in a shadow that made it hard to see. It was as though she had entered another realm entirely, a place untouched by time, where the very air felt like it belonged to something ancient and forgotten. She continued forward, her steps slow and measured, each one echoing in the stillness of the place. Her heart was racing again, the quiet too oppressive, the air too still. There was something else here, something watching her. The feeling of being followed had returned, but now it was sharper, more distinct. She could feel eyes on her, but every time she turned, there was nothing. The path curved ahead, and Alice's breath caught as she saw it. The clearing before her was bathed in a pale, silvery light, coming from a massive tree in the center of the glade. It was unlike any tree she had ever seen. Its trunk was gnarled and twisted, its bark dark and gleaming, as though it were made of something other than wood. Its branches stretched up toward the sky, reaching with desperate fingers, and its roots spread out across the ground like a labyrinth, snaking into the earth. The tree was alive, its energy pulsing with an unnatural force, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. Alice felt a sudden, overwhelming compulsion to approach it, to touch the ancient tree and feel the power radiating from it. But as she took a step forward, a voice stopped her. Not yet. The voice was low, gravelly, and carried a weight that seemed to echo through the very air. It came from behind her, and Alice whirled around, her dagger instinctively raised. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a figure, a woman draped in a cloak of shadows, her face hidden beneath a hood. The woman's presence was commanding, and though Alice couldn't see her face, she could feel the intensity of her gaze. There was a coldness to her, an aura of ancient power that seemed to stretch back into time itself. "Who are you?" Alice demanded, her voice steady despite the growing unease within her. The woman stepped forward, her movements fluid, almost unnatural, like the night itself bending to her will. "I am a keeper of the old ways," she said, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "The tree you seek is not for the likes of you." Alice's grip on her dagger tightened. "Why not? What is this place?" The woman's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "This is a place where time does not follow the rules of the living, where power is born from the very earth itself. But you are not ready." Alice's brow furrowed. "Not ready? I've come this far." "And yet, you still do not understand," the woman replied, her voice echoing with the weight of centuries. "You walk the path of the keeper, but the path is not always clear. The forces you seek to confront, to control, are older than you can imagine. And some forces, once unleashed, cannot be contained." Alice took a step forward, her heart pounding. "I'm not afraid. I'll do what it takes to protect the balance." The woman's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that Alice could not quite grasp. "The balance is fragile, Alice. It has been for a long time. And you, child of the forest, must choose carefully how you wield the power within you, because there are others who will stop at nothing to see it undone." Alice felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The words felt like a warning, one that echoed through the very fabric of the world. She knew the hollowing was coming, that much was certain. But now, with this mysterious woman before her, Alice realized that the battle she faced was far larger than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just fighting the darkness. She was fighting the very forces that shaped the world itself. The woman stepped back, her figure merging with the shadows around her. "Go. The path is yours to walk. But remember this, Alice of the forest. There is no balance without sacrifice. And there is no victory without a price." With that, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving Alice alone in the clearing, the ancient tree still looming before her. The weight of the woman's words settled over Alice like a shroud, and she could feel the heavy pull of destiny pressing on her shoulders. There was no going back now. The path to Narloth was still ahead, but the choices she made would shape everything that followed. She had to be ready. The hollowing was coming, and Alice was the only one who could stop it. But at what cost? The wind whispered through the leaves, a distant sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world on its breath. Alice stood in the clearing, the ancient tree looming before her, its twisted roots stretching deep into the earth like veins pulsing with forgotten power. Her mind raced with the mysterious woman's words, the warning that hung in the air like a dark omen. There is no balance without sacrifice. Alice felt the weight of that phrase settle into her chest. It was a truth she hadn't wanted to face, not yet. The journey to Narloth had always felt like a path of discovery, but the deeper she ventured into the unknown, the more it seemed that each step forward uncovered more darkness, more danger. She had thought that the hollowing was her only enemy, but now she understood it wasn't just the hollowing. There were other forces at play, powers that had been lying dormant for centuries, and forces that would stop at nothing to see the balance undone. The tree before her was a symbol of that power, its gnarled branches reaching upward, as if trying to tear through the very fabric of the sky. There was something alive about it, something ancient and untamed. Its roots stretched outward, burrowing deep into the earth, as if it were drawing from the very core of the world itself. Alice took a cautious step forward, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But the pull of the tree was undeniable. It called to her, resonated with something deep inside her, something that had awakened when she first touched the heart. This was a place of magic, a place of ancient power, and Alice was no longer just an observer. She was part of it now, tied to the balance that the world demanded. The woman's words echoed again in her mind. There is no balance without sacrifice. Alice couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the edge of something important. Something that would either save or destroy everything she had fought for. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the tree, her hand outstretched toward the smooth, gleaming bark. The air around her seemed to shimmer, a faint hum in the atmosphere, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. Her fingers brushed against the surface of the tree, and the moment she touched it, a shock of energy ran through her body. The pulse of magic that had been faint in the air suddenly exploded, surging through her like a tidal wave. Her body stiffened as the world around her seemed to collapse in on itself, the trees bending and warping, the ground beneath her feet shaking. The roots of the tree seemed to twist and writhe, pulling at the very fabric of reality. Alice gasped, the force of the magic pushing her to her knees. Her mind screamed in pain, and her vision blurred, flashes of images and emotions cascading through her all at once. She saw the heart pulsing with its own dark energy. She saw the hollowing rising from the depths of the earth, its shadow stretching across the land. She saw herself standing alone against a storm of darkness, her hands raised to protect everything she loved. The vision shifted again, and now she was standing in a different place. A city, ancient and crumbling, its streets lined with twisted, dark figures. The air was thick with a sense of dread, the walls around her closing in, suffocating her with their weight. A single figure stood before her, tall, cloaked in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood. The figure spoke, its voice low and heavy, like the rumble of thunder. The balance is delicate. It has always been delicate. But even the strongest roots can be torn from the earth if the right force is applied. Alice's heart pounded as the figure reached out, its hand resting on her chest. There was no warmth, no kindness in the touch, only the cold, suffocating presence of something ancient, something hungry. The heart is not the only force that seeks control. You must decide who will win. And then, just as suddenly as the vision had appeared, it vanished. Alice blinked rapidly, trying to steady her breath as the world around her returned to its normal form. The tree stood before her, still and silent, its roots spread wide, but there was an eerie stillness in the air now. The magic had ebbed, leaving behind a sense of profound silence. Alice's hand shook as she withdrew it from the tree, the echoes of the vision still ringing in her mind. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, the truth of what she had seen. The balance was fragile, yes, but there was more to it. There were forces beyond the hollowing, beyond even the heart, forces that had been shaping the world long before Alice had even learned what it meant to be the keeper. The path before her seemed clearer now, yet more daunting than ever. She wasn't just walking toward Narloth to confront the hollowing. She was walking into a world where powers beyond her comprehension were at play, forces that would stop at nothing to tip the balance in their favor. And Alice wasn't sure who she could trust. The woman's warning echoed again. There is no balance without sacrifice. A chill ran down her spine. Alice had always known that the journey ahead would be difficult, but now she understood that the cost of maintaining the balance would not be small. The heart, the hollowing, Narloth, these were just pieces in a much larger game, and Alice was at the center of it. She had thought that by accepting the mantle of the keeper, she would be in control, that she would be the one to shape the world. But now she realized that she was merely a player in a game much older than she had ever imagined. And the rules of the game weren't something she could bend to her will, not without consequence. With a heavy sigh, Alice straightened, wiping the sweat from her brow. The vision had shaken her, but it had also given her something she hadn't had before: clarity. She could feel the weight of the tree's energy still humming in her chest, a reminder of what she was capable of, what she had the potential to control. But there was a price to that power, a price she would have to pay. Alice knew that her journey to Narloth was no longer just about confronting the Hollowing. It was about understanding the forces that governed the world itself, about learning the true cost of the balance she had sworn to protect. She took a final glance at the tree, its dark roots reaching deep into the earth, its branches twisting toward the sky. For a brief moment, she wondered what would happen if she stayed here, if she allowed herself to sink into the ancient power of the tree. But the thought quickly passed. No, she had a mission. She couldn't afford to be distracted, not when the fate of the world hung in the balance. Turning away from the tree, Alice took a deep breath and continued on her path. The forest was still quiet, still holding its breath, but Alice knew that the true test of her strength and her choices lay ahead. The road to Narloth was far more dangerous than she had imagined, and the forces she would face were beyond anything she had encountered before. But she was the keeper now. She had accepted her role, and no matter what came her way, she would not back down. Not now. Not ever. Alice's steps felt heavier as she walked away from the ancient tree, the image of the dark figure still etched into her mind. The vision had shaken her more than she cared to admit. The woman's words reverberated in her thoughts. You must decide who will win. What had she meant by that? Was there some hidden truth about the heart, about the Hollowing, that Alice still couldn't see? The further Alice walked, the darker the forest seemed to grow, as if the trees themselves were leaning in closer, their gnarled branches twisting and shifting like fingers reaching for her. The oppressive silence of the forest seemed to press in on her, suffocating her with its weight. Even the faintest rustle of leaves felt like a thunderclap in the stillness. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each step forward more uncertain than the last. She wasn't sure how much further she could go. Her feet moved automatically, but her mind was elsewhere, distant, lost in the labyrinth of questions and fears that the vision had opened within her. What were these forces that she was up against? What was this balance she was meant to uphold, and what sacrifices were necessary to maintain it? Ahead, the path began to narrow, the trees crowding in so close that it was almost impossible to see what lay beyond. The shadows seemed to deepen, swallowing up the path ahead, and Alice felt an unnatural chill creep up her spine. She instinctively reached for her dagger, the comforting weight of it a small reassurance, but her hand trembled as she gripped the hilt. She hadn't realized how much the magic of the forest and the encounters she'd faced had drained her. She was physically exhausted, but more than that, she felt the weight of something much larger bearing down on her. Something beyond the Hollowing, beyond the heart. Something was waiting. Alice's thoughts scattered as she heard it, a soft, almost inaudible sound. A faint whisper like the rustling of dry leaves, only it was too rhythmic, too deliberate to be the wind. Her heart skipped a beat. The whispers came again, clearer this time, rising in volume until they began to blend into one continuous hum, a voice, or rather, a chorus of voices. They were coming from all around her, wrapping around her like a storm of murmured words. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow, but there was nothing visible in the darkness. Just the endless stretch of trees, their branches clawing at the sky. The voices grew louder, more insistent, as though they were speaking directly to her. Alice. It was a single voice now, low and laden with sorrow, but familiar. Too familiar. She froze. It was a voice she hadn't heard in years, her mother's voice. It had been so long since she'd last heard it, but there was no mistaking it. Alice, it's time to come home. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mother's words rang in her ears, the voice so real, so urgent, that Alice's mind faltered for a moment. Could this be a sign? Could it be the truth calling her back from this dangerous path? Her heart twisted in her chest. The pull was undeniable, a longing for the safety of home, for the warmth of her family. But something was wrong. The voice sounded too familiar, too soft, too much like the lullabies her mother used to sing when Alice was a child. And yet, there was a hollow edge to it now, a darkness that didn't belong. Alice. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, like a hand pulling at her from the depths of the forest. She closed her eyes, trying to block it out, but the voice only grew clearer, echoing in her mind. Come back. You can stop it. You can save everything. Just turn around. Her hand tightened around the dagger, but her legs were already moving, taking small, slow steps toward the voice. It was like a thread weaving through her chest, pulling her forward. She couldn't resist it, couldn't stop herself. It wasn't until her foot brushed against something cold and solid that she stopped. She glanced down in confusion. She was standing before a large, uneven stone, something hidden beneath the thick underbrush. It was ancient, covered in ivy, and there were strange, intricate markings carved into its surface. Her heart skipped a beat. The voice stopped. The forest went still. Alice's hand trembled as she bent down, brushing away the thick vines. Beneath them, the stone was smooth, worn by time but still bearing the marks of a forgotten language. The symbols were unfamiliar, their meanings lost to the ages, but they seemed to pulse with an energy that vibrated through the ground beneath her feet. As her fingers traced the markings, the world seemed to shift. The whispers that had surrounded her fell silent, leaving only the faintest hum, like the sound of an old clock winding down. And then, something else. A low, resonant sound. A rumble deep beneath the earth, a vibration that rattled her bones. It came again, this time accompanied by the slow creaking of wood, the shifting of the forest itself. Alice stepped back in alarm as the ground beneath her trembled, and the shadows around her began to warp, twisting unnaturally. The stone beneath her hand began to glow, faint at first, like the faint embers of a dying fire. Slowly, the glow brightened, casting an eerie light on the clearing. Alice's pulse quickened as she realized what was happening. The ground was shifting. The forest was changing, reacting to the activation of whatever ancient magic the stone held. This was no ordinary stone. It was a relic, a marker of some kind, tied to the deep magic of the land. And it was responding to her presence. She stood frozen as the stone began to rise from the earth, slowly, laboriously, as if it had not moved in centuries. The ground cracked around it, and the roots of the trees recoiled as if in fear. The stone glowed brighter, pulsing with an energy that made the air itself crackle with static. And then a voice, not her mother's, rose from the depths of the earth, the words carrying a chilling authority. It was a deep, guttural sound, like the roar of something ancient, something vast. "The heart is not yours to control, Keeper." The voice echoed around Alice, coming from all directions. She spun, her dagger raised, but there was no figure to be seen. The forest had gone dark again, the shadows swallowing everything around her. She was alone. Her breath quickened, her pulse racing. She didn't know whether she was hearing the voice of the earth itself or something more sinister, something that had been waiting, lurking beneath the surface, ready to be awakened. The stone continued to rise, its shape now fully visible in the dim light. It was no longer just a stone, it was an altar carved with intricate designs and symbols that glowed with an unnatural light. Alice could feel the weight of it, the power emanating from the ground beneath her. "You are not the first to walk this path, Keeper, and you will not be the last. The balance cannot be upheld by one alone." The rumble beneath her feet intensified, the earth shaking with a force that made Alice stumble. She reached out for the altar, her fingers brushing the cold surface. Her mind raced. Was this a test? A trap? Or had she simply stumbled upon something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined? The voices rose again, this time with a chorus of laughter, deep and mocking, filling the air with a sense of overwhelming dread. Alice felt herself being pulled toward the stone, her heart racing, the weight of destiny settling heavily on her shoulders. She couldn't back down now. With a final, determined breath, Alice placed her hand firmly on the altar. The glow beneath her hand intensified, and for a brief, terrifying moment, she felt as if the very earth itself was swallowing her whole. But she didn't pull away. She had come this far, and she wasn't turning back now. The moment Alice placed her hand on the altar, the world seemed to collapse into itself. A blinding flash of light exploded around her, overwhelming her senses. The very air hummed with a deep, resonant energy, vibrating through her bones. It was as though the forest itself was alive, reacting to her touch, acknowledging her presence. The earth beneath her feet cracked, a jagged line forming from the stone altar and spreading outward like a spider's web. The ancient roots of the trees twisted violently, curling into the ground with a force that shook the air itself. The low, rumbling voice from earlier returned, but now it was louder, clearer, reverberating through her chest and skull like a beating heart. "You have awakened the roots, Keeper," it said, the voice growing darker with every word. "The earth listens to you now. It knows your name." Alice's pulse quickened. The energy surging through her was unlike anything she had felt before. It was ancient, wild, and full of a raw power that seemed to call to something deep within her. She could feel the forest, feel it in her veins. It was alive, all-encompassing, and now it was aware of her. The altar continued to glow, its light pulsing in time with the beat of her heart. She felt a shift in the air, a change like the forest itself was breathing with her, reacting to her every thought. Her fingers tingled where they touched the stone, and with it came an overwhelming flood of images, sensations, and memories. She saw the forest in its primal state, a vast expanse of untamed wilderness, ancient and untouched by time. It was a world before humanity, before the heart, before the hollowing. And then she saw something darker, something that lay hidden beneath the roots of the trees, in the deepest crevices of the earth. A swirling mass of shadows, a force that had been bound and sealed away for centuries. The roots of the trees twisted beneath the earth, digging deeper and deeper, reaching toward that same force. Alice could feel it too, as if it were calling to her, beckoning her closer. The hollowing. She saw it now, not just as a force of corruption, but as a creature, an ancient being, one whose very essence had been entwined with the land itself. She gasped, pulling her hand back from the altar. The vision shattered, and she staggered backward, her heart pounding in her chest. The world around her seemed to warp and twist, as though the fabric of reality itself had been stretched thin and was now beginning to tear. The voice, deep and unyielding, echoed once more. The hollowing was not born of darkness alone. It is a creation, a reflection of the very forces you now seek to control. Alice's breath hitched. The pieces were falling into place, but the truth was more complicated, more terrifying than she had ever imagined. The hollowing wasn't just a natural evil, it was something born from the earth itself, tied to the balance of life and death. It was a force that fed on the destruction of the land, a parasitic entity that had existed for as long as the trees had stood tall. And now it was stirring once again, hungry for more. A violent tremor shot through the ground, and the trees around her seemed to groan in protest. The altar's glow intensified, and Alice felt the overwhelming pull of the forest's magic. She wanted to run, to escape, but the force was too great. She could feel the power wrapping itself around her, a bond that was both terrifying and intoxicating. She heard the whisper again, but this time it was softer, more intimate. "You are not alone in this, Alice. The forest watches you. The roots of the earth reach for you. You are bound to the land as the land is bound to you. The price of the heart, the price of balance, is not one you can bear alone." The word sent a shiver through Alice, but she knew what it meant. The forest had chosen her. The land had claimed her as its keeper, its protector. She wasn't just walking through this world. She was of it. Her blood, her very essence, was tied to the earth, and the power she wielded was both a gift and a curse. She could feel the weight of that responsibility pressing down on her, but it wasn't just the weight of the earth. It was something deeper, more personal. There was a cost to this power, a cost that would change everything. The path she had chosen wasn't just about saving the world from the hollowing. It was about understanding the very forces that shaped the world and deciding how to use them. With a deep breath, Alice stepped back, forcing herself to look away from the altar. She couldn't let the magic overwhelm her. She had to focus. There was too much at stake. The hollowing was coming, and she needed to be prepared. But the deeper truth was this: she was no longer just a traveler, a seeker of answers. She was the land's chosen one, its protector. And the hollowing was not the only force she would face. She turned toward the darkened path ahead, where the trees continued to loom like silent sentinels, watching her every move. There was no turning back now. She could feel the weight of the earth beneath her feet, the magic of the land flowing through her veins. The forest was with her, but so too was the hollowing, its influence creeping closer with every step. A low growl from the shadows snapped Alice's attention back to the path. Something was moving, something large, something unnatural. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of decay. The trees shuddered, their branches snapping and twisting as if in warning. From the darkness, a shape emerged. A creature, its form jagged and twisted, like something born from the very nightmares of the forest. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, its mouth split open in a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp, rotting teeth. Its claws scraped against the ground, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. Alice's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary creature. It was a manifestation of the hollowing, something that had crawled from the depths of the earth, a shadow given flesh. And it was coming for her. She drew her dagger, her hand steady despite the fear that gripped her chest. The creature lunged, its speed unnatural, its movements too fluid, too swift. But Alice was ready. She sidestepped, her feet light as she danced out of its path. She swung her dagger in a wide arc, aiming for its exposed flank. The blade struck true, but the creature didn't recoil. Instead, it let out a deafening screech, the sound reverberating through the forest like an earthquake. The ground beneath Alice's feet trembled, and the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing around the creature like tendrils of darkness. The hollowing had begun its attack, and Alice realized in that moment that she was not just fighting for the balance of the world, she was fighting for her own soul. The battle had begun. The creature's screech echoed through the forest, sending a ripple of fear across Alice's spine. The darkness surrounding it pulsed like a living thing, its tendrils twisting and writhing in response to the creature's call. Alice's heart raced as she realized the true nature of the enemy before her. Not a simple monster, but a manifestation of the hollowing itself, an embodiment of the very darkness she had come to destroy. Her breath came in sharp gasps as she raised her dagger, the steel glinting faintly in the dim light filtering through the trees. The creature's eyes, yellow and sickly, locked onto her with a predatory focus, its grotesque grin widening. It growled low, the sound vibrating through the air like the hum of a distant storm. The world seemed to freeze for a moment. Alice could feel the pulse of magic in the air, the force of the earth's energy coursing through her. The roots beneath her feet seemed to shift, reacting to the growing darkness, as though the forest itself was preparing for the fight ahead. She was no longer just a lone traveler. She was a part of this land, tied to it, its magic woven through her very being. But the creature didn't wait for her to gather her strength. It lunged forward, its monstrous claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Alice sidestepped, barely dodging the swipe, but the force of it was enough to send a shockwave through the ground beneath her. The creature's claws scraped the earth with an ear-splitting screech, leaving deep gouges in the soil. She spun on her heels, narrowly avoiding the creature's next attack. Her eyes were sharp, her body moving on instinct, but there was something unnerving about the creature's relentless attacks. It didn't seem to tire. It didn't seem to care. It was an embodiment of the hollowing's endless hunger, and its only purpose was destruction. Alice gritted her teeth. I can't let it win. She slashed with her dagger, the blade cutting through the air, but the creature was too fast. It dodged, its movements almost fluid, too unnatural to be real. It was as though the shadows themselves were guiding it, feeding it, making it stronger. Alice's heart pounded in her chest. She needed to end this fight, before it consumed her, before it consumed everything. The creature growled again, its mouth splitting wider as it bared its sharp, yellowed teeth. Alice's eyes flicked toward its chest, where she could see the faintest pulse of energy, a core of darkness deep within its being. If she could just strike there, if she could sever its source of power. Without thinking, Alice darted forward, weaving through the creature's chaotic swipes. The forest around her seemed to come alive, the wind rushing through the trees, the roots shifting beneath her feet as if the earth itself was urging her forward. She could feel the magic of the land surging within her, lending her strength, guiding her movements. In a blur of motion, Alice thrust her dagger forward, aiming for the dark heart of the creature. The blade connected with a sickening thud, sinking deep into the creature's chest. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The creature screeched, a sound so raw and guttural that it shook the very air around them. It writhed in pain, its limbs spasming as the darkness began to unravel, the tendrils of shadow receding like smoke in the wind. But it wasn't enough. With a final, deafening howl, the creature twisted its body, knocking Alice off her feet. The force sent her sprawling to the ground, her dagger slipping from her grasp. She gasped for air, her vision spinning as the world around her began to darken. The creature's body dissolved into shadow, reforming again, more powerful than before. The wound she had inflicted seemed to heal itself with a sickening rapidity, the magic of the hollowing mending its form, feeding it. The forest groaned in protest, the trees shuddering as though they too were caught in the creature's grasp. The roots beneath Alice's feet twisted violently, grasping at her, trying to pull her into the earth. Her fingers dug into the ground, but she was losing her grip. The hollowing was everywhere. The very land was being consumed. Then, just as Alice's strength began to wane, she felt it, a pulse of power, different from the hollowing's dark magic. A rush of energy surged through her, and she knew immediately what it was. It was the heart. Her breath caught in her throat. The heart. She had carried it with her all this time, that tiny shard of ancient magic, the only thing that could fight the hollowing, the one thing that could sever its connection to the land. But she had been holding it back, too afraid of its power, too afraid of what using it would mean. Now there was no choice. The creature loomed over her, its monstrous form towering, casting a long, terrifying shadow. Its eyes glowed with hatred, its body writhing with the dark energy of the hollowing. It raised its claws for the final strike, its jagged fingers reaching for her throat. In that moment, Alice closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She reached into her pack, her fingers trembling as they closed around the heart. It pulsed in her palm, warm, alive with an energy that she could feel deep inside her. It was more than just a tool, it was a part of her, a connection to the forest, to the very soul of the land. With a scream of defiance, Alice thrust the heart into the ground. At first there was nothing. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, the ground beneath her feet cracked open, a shockwave of power erupting from the heart as it began to glow with a brilliant, white light. The creature recoiled, screeching as the light expanded, pushing back the shadows that had claimed it. The dark magic shuddered, the hollowing's influence wavering, as if the very essence of the land was fighting against it. The creature howled in agony as the light enveloped it, the energy from the heart piercing through its darkness like a blade of pure light. The shadowed form began to twist and tear apart, its body disintegrating into dust and smoke, until nothing was left but the echoes of its cries. The land itself seemed to sigh in relief, the oppressive darkness lifting from the trees, the air growing lighter. Alice collapsed to her knees, exhausted, her heart still racing. The heart lay in the earth before her, its light fading as its power was spent. The forest around her was silent now, the trees standing tall and still, their branches no longer twisting in agony. The battle was over, but the victory was bittersweet. Alice's breath was shallow, her body trembling from the effort, but she knew that the creature was only one manifestation of the hollowing's power. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. She had severed the hollowing's grasp here in this place, but it would return. The land was not free from its influence. The roots of darkness had not been fully uprooted. The heart had done its work, but Alice could feel that the hollowing's reach was still deep, still lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Her path was clear, but it was darker than ever. There was no turning back now. She had to continue to seek the source of the hollowing, to face whatever ancient forces were pulling the strings behind it. The world she knew was no longer the same. It was a world in flux, a world where magic, darkness, and fate intertwined in ways she could not yet understand. But Alice was ready. She was the keeper. And the hollowing had just learned that it was not the only force that could control the land. The battle for the world was only beginning. The forest around Alice was still. The air, once thick with the stench of decay and the weight of the hollowing, was now cool and crisp, the oppressive energy that had consumed the land ebbing away. The trees, their bark darkened and twisted by the creature's presence, slowly began to heal, their leaves unfurling in the dim light. The distant hum of the forest, the sound of life moving through the underbrush, returned to its natural rhythm, a quiet symphony of growth and renewal. Alice sat on the ground, her body trembling from the strain of the battle. She could still feel the remnants of the heart's magic coursing through her, a heavy pulse in her chest, as if the land itself had infused her with its power. The energy was both invigorating and exhausting, the weight of it a constant reminder that she was no longer just a wanderer. She was the keeper now, tied to the land, bound to the very forces of magic that flowed beneath its surface. She glanced down at the heart, still glowing faintly in the earth before her. The bright light that had erupted from it moments before was now fading, the power spent. It was only a shard, small and delicate, yet it had held the power to drive back the hollowing, to sever the connection between the creature and the land. Alice knew that the heart was not a permanent solution. It was a tool, a weapon, but it was not the source of the power she needed. The battle with the creature had been won, but the war was far from over. Alice closed her eyes and took a deep, steadying breath. The stillness of the forest felt almost unnatural, too quiet for a place so alive. But beneath the calm she could feel the weight of something else, something deeper, older. The hollowing was not gone. It had merely been driven back, but it still lingered in the land, in the shadows of the trees, in the very soil beneath her feet. She knew that it would return, and when it did, it would be stronger, more cunning, and more determined to consume everything in its path. The battle had shown her something important. The hollowing was not a force that could be defeated by sheer strength or magic alone. It was a force of corruption, a manifestation of something older, something tied to the very fabric of the world. It was a force that fed on imbalance, on chaos, on the very essence of life and death. To truly defeat it, Alice would need to understand it, understand its origins, its purpose, and find a way to sever its connection to the land permanently. But how? Alice opened her eyes, staring at the heart in the earth. There was still something missing. She felt it deep inside her, a pull, a whisper in the back of her mind. The heart was only part of the answer. She knew there was more. There had to be. A sudden movement from the shadows caught her attention. Alice stiffened, her senses sharpening. She reached for her dagger, but the figure that stepped out from behind the trees was no threat. Instead, it was a familiar face, one she had seen only briefly in the past, a face that had haunted her thoughts since their last encounter. It was the woman, the one who had warned her at the ancient tree. She emerged slowly, her cloak billowing behind her like the night itself. Her features were still obscured by the hood, but Alice could feel the presence of power radiating from her. The woman's eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural light, as if they held the secrets of the land, of the magic that flowed through it. She moved toward Alice with quiet grace, her footsteps silent as though the very earth parted before her. "I see you've dealt with the creature," the woman said, her voice low, almost melodic, but with a hint of something ancient and foreboding. "But the hollowing is not so easily banished, Keeper. You have only scratched the surface." Alice stood up, her body stiff with tension. "Who are you? What do you want?" The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "I am one who has watched over this land for longer than you can imagine. I am a guardian of the old ways, a protector of the balance between life and death. And I have been watching you, Alice. Watching you walk the path of the Keeper." Alice clenched her jaw. "You warned me before, but you didn't tell me everything. What are you really trying to say? Why are you here?" The woman's eyes glinted with something unreadable. "Because you are not yet ready. You have the heart, yes, but you do not understand its true power. You have fought the creature, but you have not yet faced the real battle. There is more to the hollowing than what you have seen. And to defeat it, you will need to embrace the darkness within yourself." Alice took a step back, her mind reeling. "Embrace the darkness? What do you mean?" The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "The hollowing is not just a force of evil. It is a reflection of something older, something more primal. It is not a force that can be destroyed by simply cutting it away. You must understand it, learn from it, and use it." Alice shook her head, her mind struggling to process the woman's words. "But how can I use it? How can I use something like that?" The woman's smile faded, replaced by a look of solemn understanding. "Because you are bound to it. You are not just a keeper of the land, Alice. You are a part of it. The heart has chosen you, and the hollowing has chosen you too. The land, the magic, it all flows through you. To protect the balance, you must understand the forces that shape this world. Light and dark, life and death. The hollowing is not your enemy, Alice. It is your teacher. It is your reflection." Alice felt a chill run down her spine. The woman's words struck deep, digging into the very core of her understanding. Everything she had fought against, the hollowing, the creatures it had spawned, the darkness that had crept through the land, had been part of a larger, more intricate tapestry of magic than she had ever known. It wasn't just good and evil. It wasn't just light and dark. It was something deeper, more complex, and more dangerous. The woman took a step forward, her eyes locking with Alice's. "You are the keeper. The balance is yours to protect. But to do so, you must embrace the power within you. You must face the darkness and learn to wield it. Only then will you have the strength to defeat the hollowing once and for all." The words hung in the air like an unspoken truth, and for a moment, Alice stood frozen. She had fought the hollowing, had confronted its creatures, its darkness, but she had only ever fought against it. Never with it. The woman's words twisted in her mind, unraveling everything she had thought she knew about the battle she was facing. "Embrace the darkness," Alice whispered to herself. She felt the pull of it now, deep within her chest, a dark energy that had always been there, waiting. The heart had awakened it, had brought it to the surface, and now it was calling to her, urging her to use it, to control it. But at what cost? "Will I lose myself?" Alice asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment, Alice saw something in her eyes, something older than the world itself. "There is no light without shadow, Keeper, and there is no power without sacrifice. But you are the one who must decide how to wield it." With that, the woman turned and began to walk away, her cloak sweeping behind her like a shadow. "The hollowing is still out there, and you will need every part of yourself to stop it. Remember, Alice, the balance is not simply about what you save, but what you are willing to lose." As the woman disappeared into the forest, Alice stood motionless, the weight of her words pressing down on her. The path ahead had just become darker, more uncertain. She wasn't just battling the hollowing anymore, she was battling herself. And the fight for balance was only beginning. Alice stood alone in the clearing, the woman's words echoing in her mind like a distant drumbeat. She could feel the weight of them settling deep within her chest, a pressure that seemed to grow with each passing moment. The hollowing was not just an external enemy, it was a part of her now, tied to the very essence of her being. And if she was to defeat it, she would have to learn to understand it, to wield it as her own. But the cost of wielding such power. The forest around her had fallen silent, the stillness thick and heavy in the air. The trees, once bent and twisted by the force of the creature's presence, now stood tall and proud, their branches swaying in the faint breeze. The ground beneath Alice's feet was firm, but she could feel the pulse of magic beneath it, the subtle hum of energy that flowed through the land. It was the heartbeat of the world, a rhythm she could now feel in her very soul. But the question remained, how far was she willing to go to protect this world? How far was she willing to sacrifice? The idea of embracing the darkness sent a chill down her spine. It was not a choice she had ever imagined making. The hollowing had been her enemy, the very thing she had fought against, the thing she had sworn to eradicate. But now, with the woman's cryptic words lingering in her mind, Alice couldn't ignore the truth that had been thrust upon her. The hollowing was not just a force to be destroyed. It was a force to be understood, to be controlled, and perhaps even used. Her hand instinctively reached for the heart, still glowing faintly in the soil. She could feel the power within it, the pulse of magic that had surged through her during the battle. It had been the key to her victory, the weapon that had driven the creature back into the shadows. But that power was not without its price. It had drained her, leaving her exhausted, her body trembling from the effort. She had touched the edge of something immense, something ancient, and now it was calling to her. The heart had chosen her. But why? Why had it chosen her to wield its power? As she crouched beside the altar, her fingers brushing against the now dimming glow of the heart, Alice felt a deep stirring within her. There was a connection between them, a bond that went beyond the physical. It was a link to the very heart of the earth, to the forces that govern life and death. The heart was not just an object, it was a living thing, a conduit of the world's power, and it had chosen her. But what would that choice cost her? A low growl interrupted her thoughts, pulling Alice from her reverie. She froze, her senses sharpening. The forest was not as calm as it seemed. Something was moving in the shadows. Her hand instinctively went to her dagger, but before she could draw it, a familiar voice called out from the darkness. Alice. The voice was soft, almost melodic, but it carried with it an undeniable power. She turned, her breath catching in her throat. The woman, the one who had warned her about the hollowing, emerged from the trees once more, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the waning day. Her eyes glowed faintly, an ethereal light that seemed to draw Alice in, to pull her closer. "Are you ready, Keeper?" the woman asked, her voice tinged with an edge of something that could almost be called anticipation. Alice stood, wiping the dirt from her hands, her heart racing. "Ready for what?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. She had no choice but to face what was coming. The hollowing was not defeated. It was only waiting, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for its chance to strike again. The woman stepped closer, her movements fluid, as if she were a part of the forest itself. "You have felt the power of the heart, Alice. You have felt its call. But the true test has not yet come. The hollowing will not give up so easily, and it will not be vanquished by the heart alone. You must become more than just its keeper. You must become its equal." The woman's words were like a cold gust of wind, sending a shiver through Alice's body. "Equal?" Alice whispered. The thought of facing the hollowing on its level was terrifying. But the woman's gaze was unyielding, her eyes full of certainty. "The hollowing is a force of balance," the woman continued, her tone unwavering. "It was born from the earth itself, a manifestation of the world's need for life and death, light and dark. It is not simply an enemy. It is a part of the very fabric of existence. And to defeat it, you must embrace the other side. The side that you have been avoiding." Alice swallowed hard. She understood what the woman was saying, but the concept seemed almost too much to bear. To embrace the darkness? To let it consume her, to wield it as a weapon? She had fought against it, resisted it with every ounce of her being, but now the woman was asking her to accept it. She thought back to the battle with the creature. The way the darkness had wrapped around her, feeding into her every move, every strike. She had felt it then, the power of the hollowing deep inside her, a part of her soul, a force that could make her stronger, more powerful than she had ever imagined. But it was a dangerous power. It was a power that could easily consume her, turn her into something monstrous. And the thought of losing herself to it was terrifying. "I'm not sure I can," Alice said, her voice barely more than a whisper. How do I even begin to control it? The woman stepped closer, her face softening, though her eyes still glowed with an otherworldly light. You will not control it, Alice. You will become it. You will learn to harness its power, to bend it to your will. You will not be the victim of the hollowing. You will be its equal, its counterpart. Alice looked at the woman, uncertainty flooding her chest. And what happens if I fail? What if it consumes me? The woman's lips curled into a faint smile. Then you will become the hollowing, and the land will fall. The weight of those words hit Alice like a physical blow. She had known deep down that there was a cost to wielding such power. But the idea of losing herself, of becoming the very thing she was fighting against, it was almost too much to bear. But she had no choice. She had come too far to turn back now. The balance was in her hands. She was the keeper, the only one who could protect the land. And if she didn't embrace the darkness within her, it would claim the world she had sworn to protect. I must become it, Alice whispered to herself, the realization settling deep within her. To save it, I must become it. The woman nodded once, a solemn understanding passing between them. You are the keeper, Alice. The heart has chosen you, and with it you will change the world. But remember, the hollowing is not simply evil. It is a force of balance. And to protect the balance, you must learn to wield both the light and the dark. The woman turned, her cloak swirling around her like a shadow, and began to walk away. Come, keeper. The journey has only just begun. There is much you must learn. Alice watched her disappear into the trees, the weight of her words heavy on her mind. The darkness was calling to her, and the land was depending on her. But the question remained, how far would she go? How much of herself was she willing to sacrifice to save the world? The forest around her seemed to breathe in time with her thoughts, and for the first time since she had arrived, Alice felt truly alone. The path ahead was uncertain, and the shadows within her were growing deeper. But one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. The keeper must embrace the darkness, if she hoped to save the light. Alice stood motionless as the forest closed in around her, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. The woman had spoken the truth, but it was a truth that felt too heavy to bear. She had always seen the world in black and white, light and dark, good and evil. But the hollowing had shattered that simple dichotomy, revealing the complex web of forces that governed the land. And now, Alice was bound to them, caught between light and shadow, between creation and destruction. The path ahead was no longer clear. She had stepped into the unknown, the land's magic flowing through her veins, and with it came the terrifying knowledge that the hollowing was no longer just her enemy. It was a part of her, just as the heart was. She had to learn to balance both the light and the dark within herself if she was to protect the world she had sworn to save. But how? How could she wield such a dangerous force without losing herself to it? The hollowing was a corrupting, insidious power, one that fed on fear, on pain, on the destruction of life itself. And yet, it was tied to the land, to the balance of nature, to the cycle of life and death. Alice was the keeper now. It was her responsibility to protect that balance, but at what cost? The question gnawed at her, pulling her in every direction. She felt the weight of the heart still pulsing in the soil before her, its glow faint but steady, as if it were waiting for her to act. She could feel the land beneath her feet, its magic seeping into her very bones, urging her forward. But the shadows were there too, lurking just beneath the surface, whispering promises of power, of strength. Alice clenched her fists, her heart racing. She couldn't ignore it any longer. The hollowing was not just a force to be fought, it was a force to be understood. She had seen its reflection in the creature she had battled, in the darkness that had risen from the earth. And now it was time to face it head-on. With a deep breath, Alice reached for the heart, her fingers brushing against the cool stone. As soon as her skin made contact, a surge of power shot through her, a rush of energy that made her gasp. The forest around her seemed to shudder, the trees groaning in response to the awakening magic. The earth beneath her feet trembled, and the air grew thick with an electric charge. The heart flared with light, its glow intensifying as if it were alive, responding to Alice's touch. The energy radiated outward, spreading through the clearing, through the trees, through the very land itself. The magic of the heart was the land's heartbeat, a pulse that echoed in time with Alice's own. And as the light grew, so too did the darkness. The shadows stretched, creeping from the edges of the clearing like tendrils of smoke, winding their way toward Alice. The hollowing was awakening within her, the dark magic that had once been her enemy now coursing through her veins. She felt its hunger, its need to consume. It whispered to her, its voice like a low growl in the back of her mind, urging her to give in, to surrender. But Alice fought back, pushing against the pull of the darkness. She would not be consumed. She would not lose herself. She was the keeper, and it was her duty to protect the balance, not to become a slave to the very force she sought to destroy. "I won't give in," Alice whispered to herself, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I will control it." The shadows recoiled at her words, but they did not retreat. They circled her, drawn to the power that flowed from the heart, just as she was drawn to them. It was a dance of forces, a delicate balance between the light and dark, a battle for control over the very soul of the land. Alice's grip on the heart tightened, and with it, the pulse of magic grew stronger. She could feel the land's energy flowing through her, its magic coursing through every fiber of her being. The heart was hers, its power hers to wield, but the question remained, could she control it? The darkness clawed at the edges of her mind, feeding on her doubt, on her fear. It whispered of power, of strength beyond imagination. It promised that with the hollowing she could save the world and destroy it. All she had to do was surrender. But Alice wasn't ready to surrender. She had seen the destruction the hollowing had caused, the way it twisted everything it touched. She couldn't let it consume her, no matter how tempting the offer. "I am not you," Alice muttered, her voice low but fierce. "I will not become you." And then, with a surge of will, Alice closed her eyes and focused on the heart, on the magic of the land that flowed through her. She drew on its power, its connection to the earth, and she began to push back against the darkness. At first, the shadows resisted. They lashed out, swirling around her like a storm, but Alice held firm. She could feel the power of the heart surging through her, filling her with energy, with strength. The magic of the land, the magic of life itself, was with her. She was not alone. The ground beneath her trembled once more, but this time, it was not with the same feeling of dread. The earth was responding to Alice, to her connection to it, to her will. The shadows began to recede, slowly at first, as if they were unwilling to release their hold. But Alice continued to push, to fight, her mind focused, her heart steady. With a final, decisive push, the darkness recoiled, retreating back into the earth, back into the depths from which it had come. The heart's light flared one last time, a brilliant explosion of magic that sent a shockwave through the forest. The trees shook, the ground cracked, and the air hummed with power. And then all was still. Alice stood at the center of the clearing, breathing heavily, her heart pounding in her chest. The shadows had retreated, but the darkness within her remained. She could feel it, a quiet whisper at the back of her mind, a constant presence, waiting. The hollowing had not been defeated. It was still there, still a part of her. But now Alice understood. She understood that she was not just fighting the hollowing. She was becoming it, learning to wield its power, to balance it with the light. The journey ahead would not be easy. The darkness within her was not something to be taken lightly. It was a force that could either destroy her or save her, depending on how she chose to wield it. She glanced at the heart, its glow now faint, but its presence still strong. She could feel its power, its call resonating deep within her soul. The hollowing was not her enemy. It was her counterpart, her shadow. And to protect the world, she would need to embrace it, learn from it, and harness its power. But the cost would be great. The balance she sought to protect was fragile, and the darkness within her would always be there, lurking, waiting for the right moment to consume her. Alice took a deep breath and turned toward the path ahead. The journey was far from over. The land still needed her. The hollowing still needed to be stopped. But now, with the heart and the magic of the land at her command, Alice knew that she had the strength to face whatever came next. And she would face it, not as a victim of the darkness, but as its equal.